Imagine waking up inside your favorite manga, only to realize you've become the story's most hated villain. A spoiled noble known as the White Pig Lady, hated by everyone and destined to be executed. She knows exactly how her story ends, so instead of chasing the prince, she decides to rewrite her fate from the very beginning. The story begins with loud shouts echoing through the hallway as someone desperately calls for the young master. Holding a document, the companion asks young master Ricardo why he suddenly called off his engagement. Ricardo says there is nothing to discuss because the annulment is final. The companion points out that the engagement was only arranged recently. Ricardo says he never would have agreed if he had known what kind of person she was. He refuses to marry someone like her. He even goes as far as calling the girl a white pig. Subscribe before we prove him wrong. Elsewhere, a maid asks Britney what she thinks of the latest pastry. The daughter of Earl Harks calmly takes another bite before giving her opinion. Britney points out the changes to the recipe. She notices the different butter blend, praises the rich but balanced flavor, detects extra cinnamon in the icing, and says it passes her standards. The chefs breathe a sigh of relief as the maid asks if the pastries are good enough. Britney answers with nothing but a sharp glare. Britney scoffs, asking if they really think such a tiny portion is enough. Calling them slow, she orders 5 times as many pastries to be delivered to her room immediately. The door flies open as grandfather storms inside and calls out to Britney. She turns toward him and calmly asks what is wrong. He urges Britney to stay calm as he hands her a letter, explaining that it came from Lord Richard of the Astle Earldom. He then delivers the devastating news. Lord Richard has requested to annul their engagement. Britney freezes, with her teacup still in hand, stunned by the revelation. The cookie slips from her fingers as memories of the future come rushing back. Britney quietly excuses herself and walks away despite her grandfather and the chef calling after her in concern. There is no denying it anymore. She realizes she has been reincarnated into the world of Meryl and the door to the royal palace, her favorite shoujo manga. The story follows Meryl, a girl raised in a remote countryside town who is revealed to be the kingdom's lost princess and brought to the royal palace. Not long after, Meryl loses the biological brother who had always treated her with kindness. The manga tells the familiar story of Meryl overcoming the relentless bullying of her half-sister, Angela, before growing into a respected princess. Back in her room, Britney closes the door and recalls how Angela's cruelty and the actions of her followers always left her feeling sick. She stares into the mirror with both hands pressed against the glass, horrified to realize that she has become one of those very bullies. Britney takes in her current appearance. At only 12 years old, the scale reads 80 kilograms, and her body is noticeably overweight. She examines herself more closely, noticing her acne-covered skin and the unpleasant body odor. The truth finally clicks. She really is the infamous White Pig Lady. Britney falls into despair, wondering why she had to reincarnate as the series' most hated character. Then, an even bigger problem crosses her mind. A chill runs down her spine as she realizes where this path leads. If nothing changes, she is destined to die. 5 years later, when the neighboring kingdom's prince exposes Princess Angela's crimes, Angela shifts all the blame onto Britney without hesitation. Cast aside as a scapegoat, Britney is sentenced to execution. Determined to escape that fate, Britney rummages through her wardrobe and decides to stay as far away from Angela as possible. She remembers that Angela deliberately surrounds herself with girls she considers less attractive, so her own beauty stands out even more. A knock interrupts her thoughts. Britney quickly changes into workout clothes, convinced that losing weight and avoiding Angela altogether may be enough to escape her doomed future. The chef enters with a serving cart, explaining that he has brought her tea, the cookies she requested, and a selection of sweets ordered from the capital. Caught off guard by her outfit, the chef asks where she is going. Britney simply tells him she is heading out to exercise. Britney asks him to take the tea and sweets away, then instructs him to serve her only a tiny, bird-sized portion for dinner. The chef stares at her in disbelief. Concerned, the chef asks whether something was wrong with the food. Britney clenches her fist and explains that her broken engagement has given her the determination to change. With her goal set on reaching a healthy weight, Britney ties back her hair and steps outside, vowing that today marks her new beginning. She starts jogging around the estate, convinced that since she had never exercised before, the weight should come off quickly. That confidence disappears almost immediately as exhaustion overwhelms her. Every step makes her body feel unbearably heavy. Britney comes to a stop, gasping for air after barely making it any distance. In the background, 2 maids quietly snicker at the sight. The maids mock her, joking that the pig is waddling around instead of jogging. Britney lets out a quiet sigh, knowing she has become the estate's laughingstock, just as she expected. She recalls how the original Britney spent her days bullying and mistreating the servants throughout the estate. As her shoelace comes undone, our girl crouches down to catch her breath. She bitterly admits that this is the worst possible situation, realizing she is now facing the consequences of her own past actions. As Britney sits on the ground catching her breath, a voice suddenly asks what she is doing out there. The speaker is Luther, Britney's cousin and the heir to the Hark's earldom. Smiling warmly, he remarks that it is rare to see her outside. Britney immediately recognizes him as Big Brother Luther, the man the original Britney adored. Although those feelings remain in her memories, they now feel as though they belong to someone else. Britney explains that she is trying to lose weight and asks him not to worry about her. Luther smiles and tells her she is already cute just the way she is, leaving Britney wondering whether he actually means it. Still struggling on the ground, Britney insists she has already made up her mind. No matter what anyone says, she is going to lose weight. As she awkwardly reaches past her stomach to tie her shoelaces, she cannot help wondering why someone as handsome as Luther never appeared in the original manga. Luther kneels beside her and quietly ties her shoelaces. Looking up with a gentle smile, he asks if he can join her for the run. Our girl asks whether he is really free, but Luther cheerfully replies that he has already finished his work, studies, and sword training for the day. The two begin jogging together, and the maids immediately start swooning over how handsome Lord Luther looks. Struggling to keep up, Britney cannot help noticing how differently they treat her now. Noticing her flushed face, Luther asks if she is all right. Britney forces herself onward, telling him not to worry because her body is simply protesting the exercise. The guy asks if she is really okay, but Britney begs him to stop talking for a moment because she has completely run out of energy. Britney's legs finally give out, and she collapses onto the cobblestone path. Luther watches in surprise. Flat on the ground, Britney weakly reaches out a hand and admits defeat. After pushing herself so hard, she has nothing left. Without a word, Luther lifts Britney onto his back, leaving her staring at him in stunned silence. Our girl protests in shock, but Luther simply reassures her that everything is fine and promises he will not let her fall. With an easy smile, Luther remarks that he is stronger than he looks. Britney can only marvel at how effortlessly he ran, while she ended up soaked in sweat. Embarrassed, Britney lowers her head and silently apologizes for drenching his shoulder with sweat. She quietly holds on as Luther carries her back, never once showing the slightest hint of annoyance. Word quickly spreads across the estate as everyone wonders what could have happened to Lady Britney. While reading a book, Britney suddenly remembers that the original Britney hated studying. Despite being a noble, she grew up with surprisingly little general knowledge. Her tutor is astonished to see her studying so diligently, pointing out that she normally falls asleep within the first 3 minutes of every lesson. Britney can only laugh awkwardly. Her instructor praises the precision of her needlework, saying her talent has finally begun to shine. Britney smiles with quiet pride, knowing she would make a fool of herself in high society if she stayed the way she was. During dinner, Britney asks grandfather for permission to study geography, economics, and politics as well. Caught completely off guard, grandfather jokingly asks if she ate something strange, pointing out that she has even started eating less. Britney smiles and explains that she has started dieting because being overweight is unhealthy. She adds that she plans to reduce her daily intake from 1,200 calories to just 300. Grandfather immediately objects, warning that she will starve on such a strict diet. He insists on having plenty of sweets prepared for her later instead. He looks to Luther for support, while Britney realizes just how much he spoils her. Even so, the thought of sweets no longer appeals to her. Britney thanks him with a gentle smile, silently promising herself that she will not give in to temptation. When it is finally time for her bath, the maids begin wiping her down. Although she feels uncomfortable letting others bathe her, she accepts it as the norm in this world. Even then, she realizes it is not enough to get rid of her body odor. She glances at the servants and reminds herself not to expect miracles when all they have are water and cloth. Britney finds herself longing for a proper soak, fondly remembering the large public bathhouses from her previous life. The next morning, a knock comes at Britney's door as a familiar voice asks if she is awake. Britney sits up in surprise to find Big Brother Luther outside. He explains that there are no lessons today and asks if she would like to go out with him. Delighted by the invitation, Britney eagerly agrees and promises to get ready immediately. Chuckling, Luther tells her he will be waiting at the stables. When Britney arrives, Luther is already waiting beside a large horse. She gestures toward it and asks if they will be riding this horse. Luther remarks on how quickly she got ready, admitting he never expected her to accept his invitation. Britney laughs awkwardly, remembering that the original Britney usually spent half the day preparing, so his surprise is understandable. Looking over at the horse, Luther says it should have no trouble carrying both of them since it is a sturdy breed brought from overseas. Britney eyes the horse with concern and points out that the animal's strength is not the issue. She wonders whether carrying both of them would simply be too much. The guy studies her for a moment before commenting that something about her has changed. Britney freezes, wondering if the difference is really that obvious. Before she can react, Luther effortlessly lifts her into the saddle. Britney gasps, her face turning bright red. Amazed by his strength, Britney blurts out a compliment. Luther smiles warmly and explains that years of training have made it second nature as he climbs up behind her. Our guy climbs onto the horse behind Britney with ease, takes the reins, and tells her they are ready to head out. They ride past peaceful country cottages and wide open fields, with snow-capped mountains rising in the distance beneath a clear sky. As Luther gently pats the horse's neck, he asks Britney if she is still worried about it. She gives an awkward smile and admits she is just afraid the poor horse might end up with broken bones because of her. Luther chuckles and tells her not to worry, pointing out that they have already reached their destination. Towering mountain peaks stand before them. Britney admires the scenery and notices a pond nearby. Luther explains that it was formed by a volcanic eruption long ago. She takes a deep breath and catches a familiar scent, wondering if it could be a hot spring. Our guy looks at her in surprise and asks how she knows about hot springs. Caught off guard, Britney quickly claims she read about them in a book, while inwardly realizing that someone like the original Britney should not know such a thing. He confirms that it is indeed a hot spring and explains that several more can be found throughout Hark's territory. She crouches beside the spring as the familiar scent stirs memories of her past life. She places a hand on the warm ground, wondering if the heat comes from geothermal energy, when a sudden thought flashes through her mind. With visions of a massive public bathhouse in mind, Britney excitedly points toward the spring and asks whether its water can be piped into town. Luther gives her a puzzled look and asks what she means. Britney immediately starts panicking, realizing how strange her idea must sound. He remarks that it is certainly an unusual suggestion, adding that even the local animals use the hot springs. Trying to recover, Britney hurriedly explains that she was only thinking the hot spring water could be used for bathing instead of ordinary baths. Although Britney herself lives in luxury, Hark's territory is far from prosperous. Its famous horses are valuable mainly during wartime, and many residents fail to survive the harsh winters. Looking over the land, Britney realizes the region suffers from food shortages, poor sanitation, and frequent outbreaks of infectious disease. As they ride through the countryside, our girl recalls passing several villages along the way. One glance is enough to see how little the people have. Luther agrees that public baths would be beneficial, but explains that improving sanitation must come first if the commoners are expected to manage them properly. Our girl imagines a grand public bathhouse where everyone can stay warm, healthy, and free from disease. Luther gently reminds her that the territory barely has enough money to support itself, forcing Britney to admit he has a point. Luther then mentions that a hot spring on the mansion grounds flows straight into the river without anyone making use of it. Britney's eyes immediately light up as he asks if she wants to see it. Our girl eagerly raises her hand and says she would love to see it. Luther smiles and promises to discuss the idea with grandfather once they return. As they continue talking, Britney cannot help wondering why he treats her so kindly. Since he never appeared in the original manga, she has no idea what to make of him. He explains that drawing water directly from the hot spring is not feasible, but he hopes to raise the funds to build a proper waterway one day. Improving the territory has always been his goal, which is why he studies so diligently at the royal capital. She praises him, calling him a worthy future lord. With a faint smile, Luther remarks that she seems like an entirely different person from before. Our girl breaks into a nervous sweat as he continues smiling. She quickly realizes those polite words are actually subtle jabs at the person she used to be. Luther smiles warmly and tells Britney he is genuinely happy to see how much she has matured. Britney scratches her head in embarrassment, but her expression freezes when Luther casually adds that he can now send her off to be married without any worries. His gentle smile never falters as our girl realizes her suspicions were right. Beneath his kind demeanor lies a calculating mind. He explains that grandfather refuses to hand over the title of lord, while Britney remains unmarried, even though grandfather is no longer suited to govern. Grandfather had already decided that Luther would inherit Hark's territory after officially adopting him into the family. Unlike Luther, however, his biological parents are greedy spenders who fully intend to take advantage of the wealth their son is set to inherit. Fearing for Britney's future, grandfather postponed transferring the lordship to Luther. As Luther walks off, Britney realizes the truth. He cannot officially take over Hark's territory until she is married. He then shares what he believes is good news. An acquaintance from the capital mentioned that his sister is looking for new companions, so Luther recommended Britney. A sense of dread washes over her. She cannot imagine who would be searching for companions, but something about it feels terribly wrong. The answer hits her like a bolt of lightning. The acquaintance's sister is Princess Angela. Seeing Angela as the biggest death flag in the story, Britney panics at the thought of crossing paths with her this early. Britney immediately tells Luther she has no intention of going to the capital. To her, this is a matter of life and death. Surprised by her reaction, Luther turns to look at her. Clenching her fists, Britney shows her resolve. If she ever has to leave home, she will find another path that keeps her far away from Angela. He stares at her in confusion and asks if she really dislikes the idea that much. Britney firmly says yes, but Luther reminds her that turning down a request connected to the royal family could have serious consequences. With a light chuckle, he explains that it is only a recommendation for now. Countless girls are hoping to become the princess's attendants, so nothing has been decided yet. Since there is no guarantee, he figures there is no harm in asking. Our girl worries about the political and financial consequences for both Luther and Hark's territory, asking whether refusing the offer would put him at a disadvantage. Luther reassures her that it will not affect him at all. He reveals that the acquaintance he mentioned is none other than Crown Prince Marlowe, with whom he has always had a good relationship. Britney quietly connects the dots, realizing that Princess Angela is Marlowe's younger sister. Desperate to avoid the arrangement, Britney squeezes her eyes shut and begs Luther to tell the Crown Prince that she is hopelessly stupid and completely unfit to serve the princess. He lets out a quiet laugh, amused by how unexpectedly she is behaving. The old Britney would have been dreaming about fashionable dresses, famous suites, and the prestige of joining the princess's entourage. Instead, Britney nervously insists that she is perfectly happy living a quiet life in the countryside. Our guy admits that her recent changes have made him reconsider. For now, he will drop the idea of sending her to the capital. Even so, he reminds her that he wants to become Lord of Hark's territory as soon as possible. As a gentle breeze stirs the leaves around them, Luther makes her an offer. He will give her 3 years to find a new fiancé. With a reassuring smile, he promises that if she becomes engaged before turning 15, he will not send her to the capital. Britney is left speechless. Her last engagement only just fell apart, and now she is somehow expected to find another fiancé within 3 years. He explains that he originally intended to send her to the capital without discussion. However, after witnessing how much she has changed, he believes she now has a real chance of finding a suitable match. Overwhelmed by the impossible challenge, Britney nervously asks what will happen if she fails. He smiles calmly and delivers the ultimatum. If she cannot find a fiancé within 3 years, he will personally send her to Princess Angela, just as originally planned. Britney breaks into a cold sweat. Britney panics, convinced that no one would ever want to marry an overweight girl from a poor territory. She desperately begs Luther to extend the deadline until she turns 17, but he refuses to budge. 15 is his final answer. He explains that she does not have to marry by then. She only needs to find someone willing to become her fiancé. Our guy looks at her and asks if the deal is really that unreasonable. Britney sighs to herself. If she were the kind-hearted heroine Meryl, finding a fiancé would probably be easy. Unfortunately, she is the infamous white pig lady instead. She grimaces in despair, wondering where she is supposed to find a boy her age who actually prefers larger women. Britney asks what he would do if she accepted the deal now, only to convince grandfather to let her stay later. Luther admits that would certainly complicate things, but assures her he is keeping a close eye on her. Still smiling, Luther casually reveals that he already has a backup plan for a situation like that. Britney can only stare in disbelief, finally realizing that beneath his gentle smile lies someone far more calculating than he first appeared. Our girl tells the kitchen staff to load her meals with vegetables and trim the fat from any meat or fish, reminding them of the changes she requested earlier. The head chef respectfully agrees to her request while the kitchen assistants watch in surprise. Looking over a nutrition chart, Britney realizes cutting out protein completely would destroy her muscle mass and make it even easier to gain weight. When a chef suggests a rich butter sauce to match her old preferences, she immediately grabs the salt shaker and flatly refuses the butter. She insists that a simple sprinkle of salt is all her meal needs. The head chef reluctantly agrees, remembering how the old Britney used to indulge in endless sweets, burgers, and pastries. A maid suddenly rushes in to announce that Count Astarl and Lord Ricardo have arrived, interrupting the conversation. To Britney's surprise, Count Astarl and Ricardo bow deeply before the table and offer a sincere apology. As grandfather watches anxiously, our girl asks if they're all right, but Ricardo and Count Astarl quickly tell them not to worry. Astarl admits that Ricardo behaved disgracefully, while our girl quietly listens from the side. Clutching his injured face, Ricardo grimaces in pain as Britney realizes he's her former fiancé, Ricardo Astarl, the second son of the Astarl Count family. Astarl explains that the annulment was never the family's decision, but something Ricardo acted on without anyone's approval. He then asks to revoke the annulment, despite knowing it's a bold request, while Ricardo silently looks away with a faint blush. Grandfather laments that Britney has been so heartbroken she can barely eat, leaving her internally screaming that she's just trying to diet. Count Astarl lowers his head, admitting he has no words after realizing how deeply Britney must have been hurt. Britney can't blame Ricardo for wanting out, thinking she'd run too if she were forced to marry someone extremely overweight, foul-smelling, ill-tempered, and unattractive. Astarl asks Grandfather to lift his head, filling the old man with hope. Our girl assures them she isn't upset about what happened, but her stiff smile, weighed down by her chubby cheeks, catches Ricardo and Astarl off guard. Astarl reminds Ricardo to appreciate Britney's kindness, leaving him visibly startled, as she quietly reflects on how awkward this conversation has become. She tells Ricardo not to worry about her, secretly realizing that if the annulment is revoked, meeting Luther's condition would become much easier. She says she'll respect whatever decision Grandfather and the Astarl family make, determined not to force anyone into something they don't want. As Grandfather, Count Astarl, and Ricardo continue talking, our girl quietly slips away, deciding to avoid Ricardo around the mansion for now. Her mood quickly lifts as she excitedly heads off to check the hot spring Luther mentioned. 15 minutes later, the brutal heat leaves Britney drenched in sweat and struggling to keep going. Barely able to crawl forward, she grumbles about the enormous Hark's estate and the scorching weather, wishing she had a horse before spotting a dried-up pond nearby. Panting as she wipes the sweat from her face, Britney declares she's finally arrived, only to notice something unexpected. She finds hot spring water flowing from the rocky ground and immediately recognizes it as the spring Luther mentioned. Looking over the area, our girl realizes the hot water flows straight into the river, leaving nowhere suitable to bathe. That's when an idea strikes, and she remembers the dried-up artificial pond she passed earlier. After testing the warm spring water, Britney decides to ask Luther about building a waterway to redirect it into the dried-up pond. In her mind, Luther calmly shuts the idea down, explaining that a hot spring project is far beyond their current budget. Our girl slumps in disappointment, feeling completely stuck, until someone suddenly catches her attention. She turns around in surprise and finds Ricardo standing behind her. Standing among the trees, he coldly declares that he refuses to go along with the engagement. He explains that their fathers have decided to restore the engagement, while Britney quietly accepts the situation. Unable to hold back his frustration, Ricardo bluntly declares he'll never accept Britney as his wife. She lets out a weary sigh and reminds him that, as a count's daughter, she has no authority over the engagement, telling him to speak with Grandfather instead. Ricardo squats down in frustration, cursing his fate and complaining about being paired with her, while she silently listens beside him. Pointing a finger at her, Ricardo demands that she ask Count Hark's to cancel the engagement, convinced her grandfather will honor her request. Our girl admits he has a point, but realizes the engagement brings far more value to the Hark's domain than she ever could on her own. She recalls how Ricardo's territory flourishes thanks to its advanced technology, agriculture, industry, and engineering. As she surveys the land, an idea begins to take shape. Our girl agrees to speak with Grandfather for him, leaving Ricardo stunned before she adds that she has one condition. Using a negotiation trick she learned from her aunt in Osaka, Britney opens with an absurd demand, asking Ricardo to build waterways across the entire Hark's domain. Ricardo immediately protests, arguing that such a project would cost a fortune and take enormous effort, while Britney quietly notes how dependable he is despite his age. She asks if he'd be willing to lend his knowledge and expertise, and Ricardo says he'll hear her out first. Following up with a much more reasonable request, she explains that she only wants to improve the garden area. She proposes redirecting the hot spring into the artificial pond before letting the water flow into the river. To seal the deal, Britney flatters Ricardo by saying the Astarl family's technology should make a project like this easy. Putting the final step of her negotiation into action, Britney flashes Ricardo a sweet smile, but the unsettling grin only makes him recoil. Ricardo reluctantly agrees, figuring the project won't take much manpower and will help him end their engagement sooner. Delighted, our girl celebrates and promises to speak with Grandfather about the annulment. As she walks away, Britney quietly reminds herself that convincing Grandfather is a completely different challenge. She recalls that having a fiancé actually works in her favor, since as long as she's engaged, Luther has no reason to send her to the capital. Watching Britney, Ricardo realizes she's nothing like the girl he imagined from her portrait. He remembers seeing the portrait of a delicate beauty with curly black hair and bright blue eyes, and how he instantly fell for her. To Ricardo, that portrait radiated beauty, intelligence, and kindness. Remembering how captivated he was, Ricardo recalls sneaking into the Hark's estate without telling his father, eager to meet the girl he compared to a white lily. As he approached the estate gates that day, he had no idea what awaited him. Peeking through the iron gates, Ricardo fondly imagines his white lily just as someone announces that a table and chair have been prepared for Lady Britney. From behind the gates, Ricardo is horrified to see the real Britney berating a maid and calling her useless and ugly, shattering the image he'd built from her portrait. Ricardo bitterly thinks she's the one who's truly ugly. As Britney threatens her trembling maid to bring more snacks or answer to grandfather, Ricardo realizes her cruel personality is just as off-putting as her appearance. He desperately protests, but his father refuses to listen, leaving him terrified at the thought of marrying someone like her. Night after night, nightmares keep Ricardo awake as he dreams of a giant pig lady sitting on him while stuffing herself with sweets. Pale and exhausted, he realizes he's lost 5 kilograms in a single week and convinces himself he has to end the engagement before it destroys him. He bows until his forehead touches the floor, apologizing after his father quickly discovers what he did. With his face wrapped in bandages, he braces himself for Count Harks and Britney to mock him. Instead, Ricardo is caught off guard when Britney calmly says she isn't upset and will accept whatever grandfather and the Estarl family decide. Thinking back on their conversation, Ricardo realizes Britney spoke with unexpected confidence, even boldly claiming the Estarl family's technology could handle the project with ease. He admits that Britney is nothing like the girl from the portrait, but she's far more understanding than he expected. He covers his nose and bluntly points out that she's drenched in sweat. Britney casually agrees. Ricardo says he hates dirty or lazy people, and she admits she feels the same way. He then asks why she hasn't put that mindset into losing weight. Later, as the carriage rolls along, he reflects that he can't stand people who only talk without taking action. Ricardo finally breaks the silence and addresses Count Estarl. He says there's something he'd like to ask, reminding himself that a promise is a promise. Meanwhile, our girl sinks into the warm spring with a satisfied stretch, declaring that nothing beats a hot spring. The skilled craftsmen sent by Ricardo finish the hot spring just as Britney envisioned it. Britney relaxes in the completed hot spring and reflects on how both of them got what they wanted after grandfather accepted the annulment. Relaxing in the hot spring, Britney realizes the only thing missing now is a good bar of soap. She fondly recalls making soap in her past life, experimenting with different oils and her favorite fragrances. With a disappointed sigh, Britney assumes she'll have to give up on the idea since caustic soda doesn't exist in this world. Then she suddenly freezes as a new idea flashes through her mind. Back in the kitchen, Britney asks if everything she requested is ready, and a staff member nervously confirms it is. One of the cooks gestures toward the stove, offering to prepare anything she wants if she plans to cook. A sly grin spreads across Britney's face as she tells them not to worry, leaving the kitchen staff thoroughly confused. She recalls that soap is created through a chemical reaction between fats and alkali. The olive oil stored away for her former eating habits becomes the first ingredient. Next, Britney prepares to burn the seaweed harvested from the territory in the stove. Britney carefully experiments with the recipe, dissolving ash in water to extract lye, adjusting the proportions through trial and error, and finishing it with fragrant oils. After 3 weeks of hard work, she throws her arms into the air and celebrates her first successful batch of soap. The soap lathers beautifully in the bath, and Britney can't help smiling at its rich foam and pleasant fragrance. Holding up the finished bar with pride, she celebrates her homemade version of Marseille soap, despite only vaguely remembering the original recipe. With a playful wink, our girl proudly announces that she's gone from a foul-smelling girl to one who smells like flowers. She then asks Luther if the same approach could be used to make shampoo and conditioner. Noticing the wine bottle in his hand, Britney asks if he's just returned from his inspection. Luther says he was checking on this year's wine production before a pleasant fragrance caught his attention. Our girl explains that the scent comes from her homemade soap and hands Luther a bar, showing him how it works by lathering it with water. Intrigued, he accepts the gift. He asks if she plans to let the servants use the bathhouse as well, and Britney happily agrees, asking him to make sure everyone has access to the soap. Britney places bars of soap beside a note, inviting everyone to use them, hoping Luther's words will encourage the servants to give them a try. Her thoughts drift back to childhood, when she cried alone and wondered why her mother abandoned her, realizing the servants probably still wouldn't listen to her. Grandfather offers young Britney her favorite snacks to cheer her up while 2 maids watch coldly from the doorway. She remembers those maids cruelly claiming her mother left because she'd become disgracefully fat. Seeing her burst into tears, Grandfather gently asks what's wrong, and young Britney sobs that her mother abandoned her because she was disgraceful. He is furious and demands to know who filled her head with such cruel lies. Looking back, Britney realizes that seeing her abusive maid thrown out gave her a twisted sense of power and self-worth. From then on, she started bullying the estate's servants, convinced that abusing her authority made her strong. Our girl lies there, regretting her past, when a sudden warning rings out just before something comes flying toward her. A ball bounces away as someone wonders who kicked it, only to realize it struck a person lying on the ground. The children rush over to Britney. Some apologize and ask if she's all right, while others tease her weight, try to comfort her, or scold the rude remarks. She realizes they're the servants' children, and figures that if she can't win over the adults, maybe she can start with the kids. With a warm smile, Britney invites the children to study with her and become friends, leaving them frozen in confusion. She happily welcomes them and introduces herself as their new teacher. Only 2 children timidly greet her good morning, leaving Britney stunned that no one else showed up. Our girl invites the pair to sit down, wondering if the others ran away. She soon realizes the children can't read, write, do basic math, or even practice proper manners. She begins teaching them the numbers on the chalkboard. Once they learn how to hold a pen, the children improve surprisingly fast, motivating Britney to become a better teacher herself. That determination carries over to her own studies, as she diligently reads under her tutor's approving gaze. Britney enters the dining room, where Luther turns around with a welcoming smile. A pleasant fragrance catches her attention, and Luther proudly reveals it's from the soap she made as a servant pulls out her chair. He casually reveals that he already sent some of the soap to Crown Prince Marlowe, causing Britney to spit out her drink in shock. Our girl frantically asks why he'd send it to the Crown Prince, while Luther calmly explains that the soap could become a major source of income for their territory and praises her incredible invention. He believes the soap will be popular with image-conscious nobles and valuable for improving public hygiene, and Britney agrees, pointing out how important hand-washing is for preventing disease. Our girl grabs her head in panic as her homemade solution for body odor suddenly turns into a full-blown business opportunity. Luther opens his notebook and asks for the ingredients, so Britney lists seaweed lye, olive oil, and rose essential oil. While sipping his tea, he points out that everything except the seaweed comes from a neighboring territory. He jokes that the annulled engagement with Ricardo cost them a family discount, leaving Britney to groan and apologize. She suggests replacing the olive oil and asks whether the territory has leftover waste from its winemaking process. When Luther mentions the discarded grape skins and seeds, Britney excitedly says the seeds are exactly what she needs. She explains that fruit seeds can be pressed into oil, just like sesame or rapeseed, and believes they can produce grapeseed oil even if it doesn't exist in this world yet. Luther agrees that turning winemaking waste into oil is worth testing, and Britney realizes it could be the key to mass-producing her soap. Our girl resolves to start making grapeseed soap the very next day, though Luther's true motives still leave her feeling uneasy. Luther quietly smiles and vows to live up to the expectations placed on him. After a long day of work, he stretches in his office, lets out a tired sigh, and heads into the hallway for a drink. A strange noise suddenly makes him stop in his tracks. To his surprise, Luther finds Britney sitting in front of an open food cabinet in the middle of the night, quietly snacking on a plate of pastries. Under Luther's guidance, the Hark's territory gradually built a system for mass-producing soap. He proudly watches over the growing operation as servants carry pots and stacks of finished soap. In her spare time, our girl continues researching new ideas. She spends hours studying her books in the kitchen while the staff quietly assists her. With a warm smile, Luther walks over and asks how the research is progressing. She happily reports that everything is going well. She excitedly explains that the essential oils can be substituted without any issues. Holding up a jar of rose essential oil, Luther asks if she means the oil they used to purchase from the neighboring territory. She eagerly confirms that's exactly the one. Britney realizes lavender and rosemary grown in Harks can produce suitable essential oils instead. Looking over her notes, Luther points out that while they once relied on Ricardo's rose oil, they can now make their own alternatives. Our guy asks if that means they can supply every raw material themselves. She enthusiastically confirms that it will greatly reduce production costs. As he jots everything down, Luther notes that their demand for oil will only keep growing. He suggests selling grapeseed oil as cooking oil and planting olive trees as well, and Britney quickly agrees with the idea. Luther gently brushes her cheek, remarking how soft and silky it has become. He also compliments her glowing skin, leaving our girl flustered as she quietly wonders if it's really true. Looking at herself in the mirror, Britney realizes how much her hair and skin have improved since replacing conditioner and lotion with lemon water. Her once greasy hair is now silky, and her rough skin has become noticeably smoother. Our girl can't help wondering if she's finally left her old piggy self behind. Before she can dwell on it, Luther leans in close, making her heart race and her cheeks turn bright red. He steps back and politely apologizes for touching a lady so suddenly. Flustered, Britney explains that she takes care of her hair with conditioner and lemon juice. Deep down, she can't help thinking that being handsome really does have its advantages. Luther considers her mention of lemons. She explains that she simply uses the leftover lemons from the kitchen. After a brief silence, Luther looks down at our girl and asks what seems to be bothering her. Britney groans in frustration. Even though her hair and skin keep improving, the number on the scale refuses to change. Despite exercising regularly, she still can't get her weight below 75 kilograms. Looking genuinely confused, Luther points out that she was eating snacks not long ago. Britney quietly listens as he struggles to understand her complaint. With a gentle pat on the head, Luther warmly suggests adding strength training to her routine. Britney looks up at him, clearly unsure what he means. Determined to lose weight, Britney throws herself into intense strength training, pushing through heavy dumbbell and barbell exercises, while two children watch her effort with mixed reactions. A young boy tells Britney that the book she lent him the other day was fascinating. Meanwhile, she struggles through another set of weightlifting exercises, gasping for breath. Our girl hands him another book and encourages him to read it next. The boy beams with excitement as he thanks her. She notices the young girl nearby and asks if something is wrong. The girl shyly says it's nothing important. The girl admits she was curious because Britney smells really nice. Britney smiles and explains it's the scent of her homemade soap, secretly delighted by how feminine it feels. The girl repeats the word soap with a puzzled look. Britney offers to make some together, and she eagerly agrees. Inside the workshop, the young girl gazes in awe at the scales, herbs, and bottles of essential oils. Britney watches her reaction with a satisfied smile. Our girl realizes how much easier research has become. She spent so long working alone that having an assistant now feels like a huge help. Britney explains to Maria that the soap-making process is a closely guarded secret known only to her, Luther, and his trusted subordinates. Maria happily promises she won't tell anyone. Maria diligently stirs the large pot while Britney watches from nearby. She remembers that Maria dreams of becoming a high-class servant and can't help admiring her dedication at such a young age. She considers asking her grandfather to assign Maria to her. Her grandfather gently wonders if it wouldn't be better for our girl to make friends with noble ladies instead of commoners. Britney quickly denies the misunderstanding, insisting she isn't trying to make friends. Inside, she panics as she realizes she's only made the situation worse. Our girl thinks back to 5 years ago, remembering why she never wanted anyone to see her like that. The memory takes Britney back to her younger days as she steps outside the estate and politely greets the other nobles. The noble ladies hide behind their fans and mockingly comment on how plump and radiant Britney's skin looks, pretending to envy her healthy appearance. She freezes in confusion, clutching her chest. The ladies continue whispering behind their fans. Our girl realizes that even her old self could sense their contempt. Looking back, she believes her unpleasant attitude was nothing more than a mask for her own insecurities. Grandfather cheerfully suggests preparing plenty of sweets for the upcoming tea party with the noble ladies. Britney immediately refuses, declaring that she's on a diet and won't be eating any sweets. He looks concerned and wonders why she's suddenly so determined to avoid sweets. He asks if her broken engagement is the reason. With her arms crossed, Britney explains that she's doing it for her health. She admits she's no longer happy with her own body and wants to change it. He sheepishly admits that he sent out the invitations long ago. Britney can only stare back at him in stunned silence. She stands frozen in disbelief, barely able to respond to the unexpected confession. Our girl stumbles away in a daze, wondering what she did to end up in this situation. She worries that none of the noble ladies will accept the invitation before deciding to clear her head with a bath. Britney eases herself into the warm bath, sending ripples across the water. Since the invitations can't be taken back, she decides there's no use worrying and resolves to face whatever comes. As she relaxes in the bath, Britney squeezes the soft flesh on her arm and wonders why she can't seem to lose those last few pounds. The bathroom door suddenly opens and Luther unknowingly walks in. Britney freezes in shock while he immediately throws up his hands and apologizes the moment he realizes his mistake. He hurriedly slams the door shut and repeatedly apologizes for the accidental intrusion. Britney can only lament how unbelievably awkward and unromantic the whole moment turned out to be. Our guy awkwardly admits that he didn't realize anyone was inside and says he should have checked first. Britney quietly realizes that he's actually the victim in this embarrassing mix-up. After getting dressed, Britney repeatedly bows an apology for exposing such an unpleasant sight. Luther gently reassures her that it wasn't a problem and tells her not to worry. She suggests putting an in-use sign on the door to prevent another accident. Luther nods with a smile, Agreeing that it's a simple but effective solution, he changes the subject and compliments the conditioner she created. Since lemons can thrive, even on barren land, he suggests planting them throughout the Hark's territory. Britney wonders if fast-fruiting lemon saplings might be expensive, even though they're commonly grown in the neighboring territory. The thought of Ricardo annoys her, but she decides she'll negotiate for a better price. Luther points out a sunny area in the south that would be perfect for a lemon grove, and suggests inspecting it together in 2 weeks. Britney loves the idea, but explains that her grandfather has already arranged a tea party for her. Luther jokingly asks if she's planning to save room for sweets, leaving our girl to reluctantly agree that her grandfather isn't wrong. Britney admits her grandfather has a point about making friends with other noble ladies. With a sly smile, Luther remarks that a trip to the royal capital would solve that problem instead. Britney shudders at the thought of facing Angela and Nora again, deciding that a tea party is far less terrifying. She only hopes she's lost enough weight to look decent in a dress. The mention of her dress catches Britney off guard. She takes one look at its green fabric, bright red ribbon, and golden lace before falling silent. She stares at the outfit in horror, convinced it makes her look like a Christmas tree. To her, the fashion disaster couldn't be any worse. She searches through her wardrobe, only to discover that every dress is just as flashy. Ordering a new one isn't an option either, since it would never be finished in time. Determined to fix the problem herself, Britney grabs a pair of scissors. Just then, a maid calls to her from outside the room. The maids enter and ask which dress Britney plans to wear to the tea party. They stop in confusion when they notice the scissors in her hands and ask what she's doing. Britney smiles and explains that she's redesigning the dress by removing all the ribbons and replacing them with black lace. She then asks the maids to lend her a hand. One of the maids pulls out another dress and insists it's perfectly fine as it is, saying there's no need to go through all that trouble. Britney suddenly turns around in surprise. She stares at the overly flashy dress covered in hearts and ruffles. She can't help asking if they're serious or if it's supposed to be a costume. The maid replies that it's not a dress just anyone could wear, but insists it would suit Britney perfectly. The maids exchange sly smiles and whisper among themselves. Britney quickly realizes the compliment was nothing more than thinly veiled sarcasm. Though thoroughly annoyed, our girl keeps her composure and says she understands. The two maids fall silent as they watch her. Our girl admits she isn't confident in her own fashion sense. Deciding she needs a second opinion, she resolves to ask Luther for advice. Britney points out that the maids claim the dress looked fine and asks if that's what they truly believe. She secretly imagines herself using Luther's authority to make them squirm, and the thought almost makes her laugh. Deciding she's heard enough, Britney resolves to leave the dresses to someone else and heads for the door. One maid nervously blurts out that Britney's expression changed all of a sudden. Just as she reaches for the handle, it suddenly swings open, making her jump. Luther greets her with a warm smile and explains that she has a visitor waiting for her. Noticing what she's doing, he asks if he interrupted something. Britney nervously wonders if Luther overheard her using him as an excuse. She calmly says it's nothing, then he casually admits he also thinks the dress has terrible style, leaving our girl stunned that he heard everything. The maids break into a cold sweat, as Luther bluntly tells them that they have no sense of style. With a pleasant smile, he thanks the maids for their service and announces that someone else will handle Britney's wardrobe from now on. The maids freeze in shock, wondering if they're being dismissed before their eyes drift to his earrings. Luther calmly explains that the earrings are a keepsake from his grandmother. The maid nervously asks what that has to do with anything. The maid can't understand why he suddenly brought up the earrings. Britney looks between the two in confusion, quietly wondering if she's somehow escaped trouble without even knowing why. Luther gently takes Britney's hand and asks if they're ready to leave. Once they're outside, he calmly admits that he may have startled her. She asks what just happened. She's left speechless when Luther reveals that the maids had been stealing and selling his grandmother's jewelry. Luther explains that the investigation eventually led them straight to the place where the maids had sold the jewelry. He carefully places the recovered earring on Britney's ear and explains that her grandfather wanted her to have it. With a warm smile, Luther tells Britney that the earring looks perfect on her. Our girl suddenly realizes Luther must have heard everything from the doorway. She asks if he bought the stolen jewelry back, and he calmly nods. He explains that every maid involved will be dismissed and assures Britney that grandfather fully approves of the decision. He also reveals that replacement servants have already been interviewed, impressing her with how prepared he is. With a playful wink, Luther apologizes for using her as an excuse before cheerfully informing her that Ricardo is waiting. Britney quietly wonders whether Luther was protecting her or simply taking advantage of the situation. Pushing the thought aside, she enters the room and apologizes to Ricardo for keeping him waiting. Ricardo tells her he brought the lemon saplings they discussed earlier and wants them to count as compensation. She lights up and gratefully thanks him. Ricardo looks away with an irritated expression, insisting he's already done more than enough. Not wanting to let him leave, Britney quickly proposes another deal. She holds up a bar of soap and explains that they've been making something valuable in the territory. Ricardo looks at her in confusion and asks what she means. He stares at the soap in disbelief and asks if it's really soap. Britney confirms that it is, adding that it's become the latest trend in the royal capital, leaving him genuinely shocked. Ricardo points out that the soap became popular far too quickly for word of mouth alone. Both he and Britney can't help sweating as they think about the royal capital. He suddenly realizes why Britney no longer has an unpleasant smell. Taking a closer look, he blurts out that she's also lost quite a bit of weight, earning him an annoyed scoff from our girl. Britney awkwardly brushes off the compliment, knowing her weight loss is simply the result of dieting. Luther recalls that Britney was born when he was 5 years old. Lately, she's changed so drastically that it almost feels as if she's become a different person. His thoughts drift back to the day he first looked into her crib. Baby Britney lies peacefully in her crib. With her black hair and bright blue eyes, she looks just like a little angel. Young Luther gazes at the baby with sparkling eyes, gently soothing her while thinking she couldn't be any cuter. Luther remembers how Britney's parents left the estate one after another when she was only 3. Left alone, she turned to food to cope with her loneliness, and he recalls walking hand in hand with the little girl. After being away for a long time, Luther returns expecting to see the same angelic child. Instead, he's stunned to find Britney covered in crumbs, making him think the little angel has somehow turned into a piglet. Luther also remembers how spoiled Britney used to be. She throws a loud tantrum while demanding answers, leaving both him and a nearby servant at a loss. At 13, Luther leaves Harks to study in the royal capital. Although he's worried about his family, he knows he must broaden his knowledge for the sake of the territory's future. While studying in the royal capital, Luther uncovers a harsh reality. Despite appearances, the Harks territory isn't wealthy, and its only notable specialty is raising fast horses. Our guy reflects on the territory's difficult situation. The hilly landscape makes farming nearly impossible, and with the war over, demand for their prized horses has collapsed. Barely staying afloat, Harks survive on livestock and fishing. He reflects on how ashamed he felt after learning the truth. As he buries himself in books, he wonders what his parents had been doing all those years. Overwhelmed with frustration, Luther buries his face in his hands. Even so, he realizes that those difficult days weren't entirely without blessings, as Marlowe calls out to him. Looking back, Luther considers meeting Marlowe the greatest blessing of that time. He remembers the prince greeting him with a smile and teasing him for sulking again. The crown prince was a frequent visitor to the library and always treated Luther like an ordinary friend. As Luther nervously addresses him with honorifics, Marlowe reminds him they're in a library and casually tells him to call him Mark. Curious, Luther asks what Marlowe is reading. The prince holds up a book titled The Philosophy of Beauty. Before long, Luther finds himself spending time with Marlowe and his friends. Right before exams, Marlowe gives him a confident thumbs up and insists they pull an all-nighter together, leaving Luther completely baffled. By the time their friendship had grown close, graduation had already arrived. Although Luther wants to remain in the royal capital a little longer, his duty to protect Harks calls him home. Carrying his graduation cap, he begins the journey back. When Luther finally returns, he finds that Britney has put on even more weight during his absence. She happily devours a giant burger with crumbs all over her cheeks. He stands frozen with his coat and graduation cap in hand, completely stunned by the sight before him. After returning home, Luther learns the harsh truth. Grandfather lost money in failed businesses, fell for scams, let relatives take advantage of him, and buried the territory in debt, all while wearing a carefree smile. He spends countless hours buried beneath stacks of financial records, struggling to find any way to repay the overwhelming debt. The moment he returned home, the territory's financial crisis became his burden. To Luther, the biggest obstacle is still Britney. As long as she remains the heir, he can't step in as the new lord. Meanwhile, grandfather happily spoils her with yet another giant burger. A sudden idea flashes through Luther's mind. If Britney gets married, the succession problem could solve itself. That plan falls apart almost immediately. Luther collapses in defeat after receiving Ricardo's letter requesting to end the engagement. Out of options, he concludes that Britney will have to go to the royal capital instead. Even if it becomes a burden, he sees no other choice. Then something unexpected happens. Luther notices Britney jogging outside the estate, marking the beginning of her sudden change. He watches her eat smaller meals, stop covering herself in heavy makeup, and even raise concerns about the territory's poor sanitation, including commoners sharing the hot springs. Britney changes so drastically that Luther starts wondering if she's become a different person. Believing she's finally ready, he suggests going to the royal capital, only for her to reject the idea with overwhelming fear. Instead, she vows to leave the territory another way. Luther agrees to give her a deadline, never expecting what would happen next. Before long, Britney invents soap, and he takes the first batch to Marlowe to sell in the royal capital. He lets Marlowe try the soap, and the prince is immediately impressed by its fragrance, cleansing power, and silky finish. Convinced it's a winner, Marlowe eagerly offers to distribute it throughout the royal capital. Holding the latest report with a smile, Luther celebrates as the soap becomes the talk of trend-conscious nobles. He also learns that a major deal with a trading company in the royal capital is close to being finalized. As he reviews the paperwork, Luther realizes the territory can finally see a way out of its crushing debt. Looking out the window, Luther spots Britney jogging around the estate. He smiles to himself, never expecting he'd one day worry about her pushing herself too hard. Luther catches Britney secretly snacking from the kitchen cabinet. He realizes she's probably relieving stress without even noticing it. He leans back in his chair with a thoughtful smile and decides to keep watching over our girl a little longer. Britney is relieved that her redesigned dress is finished just in time. Wearing a moss green dress trimmed with black lace, she hopes the darker colors make her look a little slimmer. The pastry chef trained by Britney prepares an extravagant table filled with sweets, towering parfaits, and fluffy pancakes for the tea party. Even though the desserts are an instant hit with the noble ladies, our girl can only admire them from afar because of her diet. The invited noble ladies arrive at the estate and thank Britney for hosting today's tea party. She greets them with a polite smile and warmly welcomes everyone inside. As Britney scans the arriving guests, one familiar face catches her eye. She freezes in surprise, unable to believe grandfather invited that person. Standing quietly among the guests, Nora offers Britney a calm greeting and wishes her a pleasant day. The moment Britney recognizes Nora, her heart sinks. She remembers that Nora is one of Princess Angela's followers. Nora is part of Angela's entourage and the same age as Britney, though the similarities end there. In the original story, she eagerly teamed up with Britney to torment the heroine. Our girl recalls that, unlike her, Nora survives the events of the original story. As tea is served, Nora quietly keeps to herself. Even so, she eventually falls alongside Angela, bringing ruin to her family. Britney decides it's safest to stay away from Nora and avoid setting off any dangerous story flags. Just then, someone calls her name. The noble ladies whisper behind their fans, mocking Britney for looking even plumper than before and sarcastically saying she seems healthy. She bites back her irritation, insisting to herself that she's actually lost weight. Something immediately catches Britney's attention. Unlike the others, Nora stays silent instead of joining the ridicule. A cheerful young woman introduces herself as Lily, saying she's been looking forward to meeting Britney. She explains that her cousin Ricardo has spoken about her often and even sent her souvenirs. Lily happily keeps the conversation going over tea, saying it's a pleasure to finally meet Britney and praising Ricardo for always looking out for her. Seeing an opportunity, our girl turns toward Nora while the other ladies remain busy with their casual conversation. It's clear they're perfectly happy staying within their own circle. A nervous thought crosses Britney's mind. Nora might really be sitting here all alone. Deciding to be a proper host, Britney greets Nora with a warm smile and thanks her for making the trip to the tea party. The unexpected kindness leaves Nora stunned. Nora timidly returns the greeting. Watching her carefully, our girl realizes she's nothing like the version she remembers from the manga. Britney can't make sense of it. Why is Nora so shy instead of acting like the arrogant, noble lady who always stood beside Angela? Her gaze drifts to Nora's short dress, making Britney wonder if it was the only outfit she had for today's gathering. Wanting to help, Britney politely asks if Nora would like a lap blanket to keep warm. The other ladies snicker behind their fans, mocking Nora for showing her ankles and comparing her fashion to Britney's old outfits. Clutching a blanket to her chest, Britney quietly listens. Britney trembles with barely contained frustration as the mocking continues. Our girl realizes there's no point trying to befriend these noble ladies. As the gathering comes to an end, Lily warmly says goodbye, shares how much she enjoyed the tea party, and invites Britney to attend hers next time. As the guests prepare to leave, Britney hands Nora a parting gift, quietly thinking what a sweet girl she is. Their farewell is interrupted when someone suddenly asks why the road ahead is blocked. Nora nervously explains that her coachman just reported a landslide and apologizes for the unexpected delay. Rather than worrying, our girl sympathizes with Nora's situation and offers to prepare rooms for her entire party, inviting them to stay until the road is safe again. Thanking Britney for the lap blanket, Nora admits her family is poor and that her constant growth makes it difficult to find dresses that fit. she quietly puts herself down, convinced she's simply not good enough. Standing by the doorway, she confesses that she hates attending gatherings filled with noble ladies. She explains that the other girls are petite and pretty, without freckles or frizzy hair, while she sees herself as nothing more than a tall, awkward girl. Listening to her, Britney realizes Nora's biggest problem might just be her lack of confidence. Even so, she reminds herself that getting too close could still lead to trouble. To comfort her, Britney grabs her own stomach and jokes about how soft and flabby she is. She admits there are days when she doesn't like her own body either, leaving Nora genuinely surprised. With a gentle smile, she tells Nora to drop the formalities and simply call her Britney. Nora happily agrees, asking Britney to call her Nora in return. As Britney takes Nora's hand, she can't help reflecting that, despite the differences between them now, they were both destined to become villains in the original story. She suggests they work toward becoming beautiful together. Nora eagerly agrees, and before long, the two grow as close as they did in the manga. Nora beams as she admires the neatly wrapped bar of soap. Britney reminds herself that getting closer to her is another step toward her destined downfall, but figures she'll be safe as long as she's careful. Outside the estate, someone points out that Britney will soon be 13 and asks if it's finally time for her to start attending social gatherings. The suggestion catches our girl completely off guard as she stands beside a pile of freshly harvested lemons. Holding up a lemon, Luther smiles and says she has been doing remarkably well lately. Since she's almost 13, he believes it's time for her to seriously start searching for a fiancé. Our girl protests that she hasn't even made her social debut yet. Luther reassures her that's not a problem, but warns that waiting until then would leave too little time to fulfill their promise. Still smiling, Luther announces that he'll accompany Britney himself. He leaves no room for refusal and tells her to give the matter some serious thought. Our girl groans inwardly under the relentless pressure. Luther's warm smile couldn't feel more at odds with the threatening words coming out of his mouth. She hums to herself, remembering that wearing makeup is considered proper etiquette at noble social gatherings. A sense of dread washes over her as she remembers that this world's face powder is made with poisonous lead. Pinching her cheek in front of the mirror, our girl recalls that lead powder causes far more than simple skin irritation. Since she once made face powder with cornstarch, she decides to head to the kitchen and make her own. Britney lets out a sigh as she walks down the hallway, only to stop dead when a tall figure suddenly appears in front of her. She studies the stranger for a moment, noticing that his light blonde hair is a different shade from Ricardo's. One look is all it takes for Britney to recognize the tall, long-haired man carrying a gift box. She's seen him before in the manga. With a pleasant smile, Marlowe introduces himself and says he hopes she doesn't mind the unexpected visit. He assumes she's the cousin Luther told him about. Britney quickly offers a graceful curtsy, introduces herself, and says it's an honor to meet His Highness. Crown Prince Marlowe apologizes for arriving unannounced and startling her, explaining that he wanted to meet her in person. Britney asks if he really came to see her. Marlowe smiles and says Luther has told him a great deal about her. Our girl is left speechless as Marlowe reveals that he wanted to meet the inventor of the soap that's become the latest craze in the royal capital. Marlowe presents Britney with a neatly wrapped gift, encouraging her to open it. She nervously accepts it, wondering what's inside, while struggling to stay composed with the handsome prince standing so close. To her, the soap was nothing more than a simple, handmade creation. The prince reveals that he brought a famous pastry from the royal capital after hearing Britney has a sweet tooth. She thanks him with a smile, but inwardly panics since sweets are the last thing she needs while dieting and considers giving it to Maria instead. Luther arrives in the hallway and greets Prince Marlowe in surprise. Marlowe casually returns the greeting. Marlowe tells him they were just talking and remarks that Britney is quite different from the impression he had been given. Luther jokes that girls change quickly at this age. Our girl shoots Luther a suspicious look, convinced he just covered something up. Luther only laughs it off. Marlowe pauses, looking back at Britney as if reconsidering what he had just heard. She warmly offers to show Marlowe around the laboratory, assuring him there's nothing secret or dangerous inside. Her invitation brings a bright smile to Marlowe's face, and he happily thanks her for the generous offer. Marlowe enthusiastically grabs both of Britney's hands, thanking her from the bottom of his heart. Watching his excitement, our girl quietly recalls what the prince is really like. She quickly realizes that Marlowe is basically an overgrown child when his eyes light up at the raw soap mixture. Luther nervously reminds him that it hasn't solidified yet. Curious as ever, Marlowe examines 2 beakers filled with liquid and asks if they're just water. Holding up a bottle and a jar, Britney explains that it's distilled water left over from extracting essential oils. What was once thrown away as waste is now used as a skin conditioning toner. She goes on to explain that each herb benefits a different skin type. Lavender soothes sensitive skin, chamomile helps dry skin, and rosemary is best for oily skin. After taking a closer look at the mixture, Marlowe can't hide his admiration and comments on how knowledgeable Britney is. He then brings up the invitation from his sister, asking if Britney truly has no intention of coming to the royal capital. Caught by surprise, Britney listens as Marlowe insists she could learn far more and accomplish much greater things in the royal capital. A wave of panic hits our girl. She's accidentally triggering the very flag that would place her in Angela's entourage. Britney tries to brush it off by claiming she's too inexperienced and would only make mistakes. Marlowe then recalls Luther saying she was such an idiot that letting her serve the princess could end in disaster, leaving Britney completely stunned. She freezes as she remembers begging Luther to tell everyone she was too stupid for the job. To her horror, he actually repeated those exact words. Beside her, Luther quietly avoids eye contact. Marlowe smiles and admits Britney doesn't seem foolish at all. He then turns to Luther and asks if he would be willing to let her help at the royal palace. Our girl quietly wonders why Luther was so determined to send her to the royal capital in the first place. Meanwhile, Luther recalls that he simply wanted to marry her off as quickly as possible back then. He gently squishes Britney's cheeks before explaining that he can't spare her because she's busy researching soap. Britney lets out a silent sigh of relief, grateful for the timely excuse. Marlowe squeezes her chick and says attending a party should be fine since Luther will be there as well. Flustered beyond belief, she hurriedly begs him to stop. Luther realizes the timing couldn't be better. The upcoming party would be the perfect place to unveil their new product. With a confident smile, Luther immediately accepts Marlowe's proposal, leaving Britney stunned by how fast he changed his mind. Our girl stares in disbelief as Marlowe bursts into laughter, noticing he didn't even bother looking at her before the decision was made. Still chuckling as he wipes away a tear, Marlowe jokingly calls Luther a complete miser, saying he's incredibly easy to read. Our girl quietly watches the exchange and can't help agreeing that Luther really is a miser. Changing the subject, Luther invites Marlowe to stay for dinner, proudly claiming the Harks family's cuisine is renowned among food lovers. Dinner is a huge success as Marlowe enthusiastically praises every bite, much to Luther's satisfaction. In the end, our girl agrees to attend the party in the royal capital for the sake of her miserly brother. Before long, Marlowe bids them farewell and departs in his carriage. Later, Britney approaches Luther and politely calls out to her older brother. She has a personal matter to discuss. Luther remarks that she's being unusually formal. She recalls Marlowe mentioning that Luther was famously known in the capital as the black-haired nobleman. Fidgeting nervously, Britney brings up the upcoming party. After working up her courage, Britney shyly asks if she could have a new dress for the event. A slow smirk spreads across Luther's face, instantly making Britney freeze. His smile might look gentle, but his eyes certainly aren't. Our girl grows increasingly anxious, convinced she'll never find a fiancé if she has to wear those ridiculously gaudy dresses. She hurriedly explains that her old self had terrible fashion sense and that every dress she owns is awful. Britney says she'd be happy with even the cheapest new dress. Luther's expression softens as he says he understands. Since Britney has lost weight, her old dresses no longer fit anyway, so he agrees to buy her a new one for the trip to the royal capital. Britney beams with excitement as she thanks Luther. Then a sudden thought makes her stop in her tracks. A bead of sweat runs down our girl's face as she wonders if Luther had been testing her all along. Luther asks what kind of dress she wants and whether she has any preferences. Britney requests something black or dark navy that will make her look slimmer. He assures her the budget isn't a concern since this year's tax revenue has been strong, prompting her to eagerly ask if the wine and horse businesses are doing well. He passes her a dress catalog and explains that the territory's growing wealth isn't just from production. Much of the credit belongs to Britney, and with their debts nearly gone, they can finally begin building the waterways. Britney hugs the catalog to her chest and quietly tells Luther how much she admires him. She admits that he's the only one in the family who truly puts the territory first. The heartfelt praise leaves Luther staring at her in stunned silence. A faint smile crosses Luther's face. Her words remind him of the boy he used to be before leaving for the royal capital, a spoiled child who cared only for luxury. Under the starry night sky, Luther vows that once he becomes count, he won't let their parents interfere with the territory's management or squander its wealth on luxuries. He reveals that their grandfather plans to retire from his duties completely. From the balcony, Luther gazes over the mountains before calling out to Britney. Watching him from inside, our girl realizes he's trying to shoulder the entire future of the territory on his own. Luther asks if she'll stay by his side. Our girl realizes this is a turning point that could change everything. She walks onto the balcony and declares that she'll never stand against her brother. To her, This is the final crossroads for Luther after all the disappointment she's caused him in the past. Britney promises to help carry some of his burden, proudly mentioning that she's been building muscle lately. The unexpected answer earns a quiet chuckle from Luther. Then Luther lets out a low laugh, wearing the same sinister grin as a storybook villain. Britney instantly freezes, wondering who this terrifying person in front of her really is. Panic takes over as Britney tries to retreat, but her legs give way and she lands on the floor. Luther simply looks at her and asks what she's doing. Before she can get back up, Luther effortlessly lifts her off the floor and settles her onto his lap. A faint smile appears on Luther's face as he teases that running away is rather cruel. Britney's face burns red while she desperately tries not to think about how close they are. After a brief silence, he quietly admits that being around Britney feels different. Somehow, she's the one person who makes him feel comfortable enough to speak honestly. Our girl immediately scoots backward, folds her arms, and blurts out that those honest feelings can stay buried forever. Luther bursts into laughter. Seeing that expression, Britney starts to wonder if his honesty is proof that he truly trusts her. Britney promises to do everything she can for the territory until the day she gets married, encouraging Luther to rely on her. While she's at it, she asks him to cancel her escort to the royal capital. Luther agrees on one condition. Britney must double the territory's income through her own efforts. The impossible challenge leaves our girl speechless as she internally panics over the absurd expectations placed on her. She jokingly wonders if she just let her true feelings slip. Luther leans in and quietly tells Britney that she has a surprisingly interesting personality. After fooling him for so many years, she has certainly earned his attention. Britney lets out an awkward laugh and insists she'll never measure up to someone like her brother. He tells her to bring that same determination to the upcoming party. Our girl is still wondering how everything escalated so quickly. Later, a servant arrives to announce a delivery. Inside the package is a beautiful dress trimmed with lace, along with a pearl necklace. The elegant gift leaves Britney staring in amazement. Confused, Britney realizes she never even picked out a dress. A note from Luther explains that he simply thought this one would suit her perfectly. Only later, while reviewing official documents, does Britney discover that Luther had already secured patents for the soap, oil, shampoo, and conditioner, and registered every one of them under her name. Left alone with her thoughts, Britney realizes Luther has never been honest about his feelings. For all his harsh words, he'd been quietly protecting and supporting her the entire time. On the way to the party, Britney and Nora share a carriage. Britney compliments Nora on how much her skin has improved, making her blush as she happily reveals that the mud from her territory became a successful skincare product, just as Britney suggested. Luther curiously asks if the famous mud pack was Britney's idea. She quickly shakes her head, explaining that the mud already existed in Nora's territory, and she merely suggested turning it into a business. He suddenly compliments Nora on her beautiful skin. The unexpected praise leaves Nora blushing from ear to ear as she shyly begs him to stop. Luther announces that they've nearly reached their destination. Britney, however, is too busy wondering how someone who acts like this can possibly be the same intimidating brother she knows. Nora happily points out that Britney has slimmed down as well. Flashing a peace sign, Britney announces that she's finally made it down to 60 kilograms. Nora looks genuinely impressed, while both she and Luther applaud the milestone. In her imagination, a chubby pig version of Britney chuckles to herself, wondering if things are finally going her way and if she might actually find a fiancé this time. The breathtaking sight of the royal capital leaves Britney speechless. Towering castle spires rise into the sky as she takes in the magnificent view alongside them. Lily eagerly waves from a distance to greet Britney and Nora the moment they arrive. Luther politely returns the greeting, making Lily blush as she shyly wishes him a good day. Marlowe casually raises a hand to welcome the group after their long journey. He greets everyone, sincerely thanking them for accepting his invitation. Watching the exchange, Nora blushes furiously and can't help wondering if she falls for every handsome man she meets. Britney presents Marlowe with a bottle of lotion, thanking him for the invitation and reminding him of their earlier conversation. He immediately recognizes it, and his face lights up. Marlowe admires the elegant bottle and eagerly thanks Britney. She tells him there are several other varieties as well and offers to send more if he enjoys using it. Without missing a beat, Marlowe starts requesting more lotion, soap, shampoo, and nearly everything else they make. Our girl quietly jots down the growing list. Luther points out that having the Crown Prince use their products would greatly boost their reputation. Marlowe happily agrees and even gives them permission to advertise the products as approved by the royal family. With a smile, Marlowe admits he's a little jealous that Luther has such a talented cousin. Something else quickly catches Britney's eye. A lavishly dressed noblewoman approaches, followed by servants dressed entirely in black like stagehands, leaving her thoroughly confused. Noticing her reaction, Marlowe explains that the woman is his younger sister, Princess Angela, along with her attendants. For some reason, they always dress that way. Britney quietly watches Angela's arrival beside Luther and Marlowe. She knew the princess would be here, but that doesn't stop her from wishing they could have avoided meeting altogether. The moment Princess Angela comes into view, Britney goes completely stiff. To her, the princess is the biggest death flag she's faced so far. Elsewhere, Luther approaches a struggling painter and asks him to create a portrait for Britney's future marriage prospects. As the artist gets to work, Luther quietly stands behind him, insisting he ignore the constant supervision. Before long, Luther starts directing every brushstroke. He asks for a slimmer figure, a sharper jawline, bigger eyes, smaller lips, and a perfectly shaped nose. The overwhelmed painter can only nod and comply. At last, Luther proudly declares the portrait complete. Britney stares at it in utter confusion, while the exhausted painter realizes he's painted someone who barely resembles the original. Looking down at the portrait, Britney slowly realizes this must be her brother's ideal type. When he asks if she said something, Britney simply brushes. The Harks family's famous cuisine owes its reputation both to her demanding standards and the results they produced. Remembering those days, 16-year-old Luther can only sympathize with the poor head chef. Britney points at one of the desserts and loudly complains that it doesn't count as real cooking. Notebook in hand, Luther is left silently questioning everything he thought he knew. To Luther's surprise, the head chef insists the kitchen is actually his dream workplace because everyone is passionate about cooking. One bite is enough to leave Luther speechless. The food is genuinely incredible, and the grinning kitchen staff proudly declare their kitchen the happiest place a chef could ask for. Crouched outside the greenhouse in the Western Palace garden, our girl examines the plants until someone asks what has captured her attention. Ricardo approaches with his arms crossed. She politely wishes him a good day. She explains she was examining the herbs, assuming they were used to make tea. Ricardo shrugs them off, saying they all look like ordinary weeds to him. Britney points out nettle for medicine, dokudami for its detoxifying properties, and thyme as a natural antiseptic. Ricardo is impressed by her knowledge, but she humbly says she only recognizes the common varieties. He gives a polite bow and thanks Britney for making sure he received the valuable soap before anyone else. She returns the gesture, saying she still owes him for helping with the lemons, olives, and waterways. Ricardo reveals that Luther told him about the servants constantly bullying Britney. Looking back, he realizes he unfairly judged her and that her behavior had simply been a desperate way to fight back. Meeting her gaze, Ricardo offers a sincere apology for completely misunderstanding her. A wave of shock washes over our girl. She panics inside, wondering just what Luther told Ricardo. Noticing how much weight she's lost, Ricardo sadly assumes Britney has been suffering all this time. Realizing he's gotten the wrong idea, our girl cheerfully assures him she's only losing weight for her health and tells him not to worry. After a brief hesitation, Ricardo awkwardly asks if it's time for them to stop being so formal with each other. He asks Britney to simply call him Ricardo. She can only stare back in surprise. Britney smiles and agrees to call him Ricardo, figuring that staying on good terms will only help in the future. He averts his eyes with a shy blush and quietly agrees. Watching Ricardo avoid her gaze, Britney rethinks her first impression. Maybe he isn't an arrogant rich boy after all. Maybe he's just painfully shy. Our girl decides it's always better to get along with people. Her attention soon drifts back to the garden, where she wonders who could possibly be using all these herbs. Elegantly dressed guests stroll through the garden party, chatting beneath large sunshades. Britney looks around in amazement. Even though the gathering is relatively small, it's every bit as lavish as she'd expect from a royal event. The young noblemen gather in quiet conversation, while groups of ladies whisper behind their fans near the refreshment tables. Our girl breaks into a nervous sweat as she watches everyone sizing up potential partners. The atmosphere feels far more intense than she expected, just as someone nearby calls out to her brother. Britney notices Luther completely surrounded by admiring young ladies, with Lily and Nora caught in the crowd as well. Her attention suddenly snaps elsewhere. The moment she sees Nora, our girl is left speechless. She can't believe Nora chose to wear that outfit. Britney silently mourns the wardrobe change. The outfit Nora wore during the journey suited her perfectly, while this childish dress does nothing to flatter her figure. She thinks what a waste Nora's outfit choice is. Before she can dwell on it any longer, someone crashes straight into Britney. A freckled young man points at Britney and loudly orders her to move, insulting her appearance. He even demands to know how someone with her figure dared attend Crown Prince Marlowe's party. Our girl stares at him in disbelief. He's the one who ran into her, yet he's acting as if she's at fault. She dryly concludes he's practically a professional scammer. Ricardo steps in front of Britney and sharply asks the young man why he's making such a scene. The freckled noble laughs it off, claiming that an out-of-place white pig lady was blocking the path. Nearby noblewomen giggle at the insult while Britney remains silently beside Ricardo. Ricardo points out that the young man is the one behaving disgracefully. Since Britney is Prince Marlowe's guest, insulting her is no different from questioning His Highness's judgment. Clicking his tongue, the freckled noble walks away. Britney softly thanks Ricardo for standing up for her. Ricardo scolds Britney for letting people speak to her that way. She fires back that he stepped in before she even had the chance to defend herself. Princess Angela quietly stands beside Prince Marlowe, her face partially hidden behind an elegant fan. Britney remarks that standing beside His Highness makes Angela seem rather plain. Just then, Luther arrives with a warm smile and asks our girl if she'd like to dance. The surrounding noble ladies stare at Britney, clearly treating her as nothing more than the opening act. Feeling all those eyes on her, she nervously admits she's not much of a dancer. A painful memory flashes through Britney's mind. During dance lessons, she accidentally stepped so hard on her instructor's foot that she broke it, leaving the poor teacher crying out in agony. Luther assures her it'll be fine and gently leads her onto the dance floor. He even tells her to try stepping on his feet if she can. As they dance, Luther compliments Britney's dress. Looking up at him, she says the credit belongs entirely to her brother for choosing it. Luther casually adds that he'd like to buy her a slightly slimmer dress next time. His comment instantly irritates our girl, who decides his feet are about to pay the price. As couples glide across the dance floor, Britney worries that everyone must be judging her for being Luther's cousin. She then wonders if Angela endures the same comparisons with Marlowe, and how exhausting that must be for someone as beautiful as her. A horrifying thought suddenly hits Britney. She realizes she's actually feeling sorry for Angela. She immediately shuts that thought down. A princess who treats her maids like disposable stagehands deserves no sympathy. Just then, Marlowe cheerfully waves them over. Luther politely greets His Highness, while Marlowe casually enjoys his drink. Meanwhile, our girl notices all eyes are on them as nearby nobles whisper that she's nothing more than Luther's extra tag-along. Standing alone amid the crowd, Britney can't help feeling out of place. She starts wondering why she ever came to the capital. A voice suddenly calls her name from behind. Britney turns around in surprise. Princess Angela peers at her from behind her fan, remarking that it's rare to see her brother make that expression. She then asks Britney if she'll be friends with her too. In Britney's mind, a terrifying Grim Reaper appears behind her. She trembles as the nightmare scenario she feared comes rushing back. Our girl internally screams that becoming Angela's friend leads straight to her execution route. Absolutely not. Around them, the surrounding guests gasp in shock, stunned that the princess personally invited her. Tears well up in Britney's eyes as she frantically realizes there's no way she can reject the princess's invitation in front of everyone. After retreating to a quiet room, Britney buries her face in her hands in complete despair. Nora stays by her side and gently asks if she's all right. Angela invites Britney and Nora to sit before getting straight to the point. She remarks that, despite Britney's appearance, she seems surprisingly knowledgeable about beauty. Nora eagerly backs her up, proudly explaining that Britney has created several groundbreaking beauty products back in their territory. She breaks into a cold sweat. She knows Nora means well, but this is one situation where that glowing endorsement is the last thing she needs. Angela asks Britney for her honest opinion of how she looks today. Britney hesitates, wondering whether the princess is actually asking about beauty or something else entirely. She realizes the original Britney would have showered Angela with compliments. But she's determined not to end up as one of the princess's followers. Smiling gently behind her fan, Angela encourages Britney to speak honestly without holding back. She bluntly says today's outfit doesn't suit her at all. Angela and Nora freeze in stunned silence. An awkward silence fills the room as the perspective shifts dramatically around the stunned trio. Britney quickly apologizes in case she caused offense and turns to leave. Angela immediately demands to know exactly what is wrong with the dress. She insists deep pink is the latest trend in the capital and proudly points out all the frills she added to make it look cuter. Flustered, Angela insists that both the maids and her guests praise the outfit. Watching her reaction, Britney quietly realizes the princess is just like her former self. Our girl realizes Angela surrounds herself with forced compliments, yet deep down, she already knows those flattering words aren't sincere. Britney gently points out that she already knows the truth and asks whether empty praise is really what she wants. Angela falls silent as Britney asks if she truly wants to be beautiful, to be praised sincerely, or if she's genuinely satisfied with how things are now. Unable to take it anymore, Angela snaps back and demands a direct explanation for why the dress doesn't suit her. Britney clears her throat, deciding to get the explanation over with. She bluntly declares that neither Her Highness nor Nora chose dresses that actually suit them. Nora blinks in surprise and asks if her dress is unsuitable too. Angela protests that hers was crafted by the capital's finest artisan. Britney nods, saying she understands their love for frilly dresses and has no doubt the craftsmanship is exceptional. Britney delivers the hard truth. As beautiful as the dresses are, they simply don't suit either of them. Britney explains that Angela's elegant, refined charm is being completely overshadowed by the dress. If she's set on wearing pink, she adds, a much lighter shade would complement the princess far better. Our girl continues that Nora's dignified presence doesn't pair well with soft pink. A chic, more sophisticated dress would highlight her beauty so well that even women would be captivated. Turning to herself, Britney explains that with her body type, hair color, and eyes, light shades like pink simply don't suit her either. She reflects that the frilly dresses every young girl dreams of are better suited to someone petite, with a gentle aura, someone like the story's heroine, Meryl. Angela quietly snaps her fan shut, signaling that she finally understands Britney's point. The princess points her fan at Britney and asks what kind of outfit she would choose if she were her stylist. Angela looks Britney straight in the eye and asks how she would style her if she were the royal costume coordinator. Our girl pictures the perfect look, a soft violet dress to complement Her Highness's eyes, bright lipstick, and loosely tied back hair. She recalls the Mehrabian rule, explaining that more than half of a person's first impression comes from visual cues. If someone dislikes your appearance, you're already at a disadvantage. Britney realizes that pastel colors actually suit Angela. Despite her villainous image, a softer, purer style could make her naturally striking. Angela quietly considers the advice before admitting it was an interesting perspective. The princess declares the discussion over and dismisses them. A wave of relief washes over our girl. She made it through, and the risk of ending up in Angela's entourage is finally gone. Tears well up as Britney grabs Nora by the shoulders and apologizes for criticizing her dress. Nora gently tells her not to worry. Nora smiles and admits she already knew the dress didn't suit her. She explains that what people like isn't always what suits them and is grateful Britney was honest. Still sniffling through her tears, our girl listens as Nora gently takes her hand and asks if she'll help pick out a dress next time. Britney happily agrees, saying she'll help as long as Nora believes she's up to the task. Nora mentions that Lord Luther prefers a sweet fashion style. Britney immediately cuts her off and warns her to stay far away from him. Nora asks if Britney is jealous or has feelings for Lord Luther herself. The question makes Britney shudder as she fiercely denies it. Our girl insists she could never imagine romancing someone like Luther, warning Nora that she has no idea what he's really like. Nora nervously stammers Britney's name and tries to point behind her. Luther stands right behind Britney, quietly remarking that such blunt criticism actually hurts his feelings. A cold sweat runs down Britney's back as she nervously stammers a greeting to her older brother, Luther. Panicking, she frantically insists she was only joking and would never criticize her beloved cousin. Luther simply keeps smiling while she shrinks under the pressure. Luther extends a hand and tells Britney that His Highness has been looking for her. Prince Marlowe has something to give her and is waiting in his room, with an escort already outside. Britney quickly says goodbye to Nora and hurries off. Crown Prince Marlowe welcomes Britney, happily telling her he's been waiting for her. Marlowe breathes a sigh of relief after learning Angela did nothing to Britney. He explains that Angela rarely shows mercy to those she dislikes, while Britney assures him they only talked about dresses. Our girl panics at the thought of Angela getting revenge. Meanwhile, Marlowe rummages through a bundle of dried herbs and announces that he brought his collection. The prince lays out his dried herbs, delighted to finally meet someone in the castle who shares his hobbies. Britney quietly admires the collection. Marlowe asks whether the herbs he picked and dried from the West Garden could help with her work. Britney eagerly assures him they would. Britney recalls the greenhouse and garden outside, amazed by the herbs' excellent condition. His Highness grew every one of them himself. Our girl clasps her hands in amazement, admitting she never expected His Highness to grow herbs before asking what he uses them for. Marlowe explains that he's recently become interested in herbal teas, soaps, and lotions. He adds that people rarely look kindly on a man with those hobbies. He tells her that beauty has nothing to do with gender and that a refined aesthetic is something to admire. Privately, she can't help thinking Prince Marlowe is quite the maiden-like prince. As he pours the tea, Marlowe says he's glad to hear that because he only shares these interests with people he truly trusts. He offers Britney a cup, and she gratefully accepts. As his reflection shimmers in the tea, he admits he'd rather knit than train with a sword and prefers growing herbs and researching beauty products over hunting. Britney recalls that the manga described him as exceptionally talented in music and painting. Our girl admits she's jealous because she's hopeless at arts like poetry and music. Marlowe explains that people in this country often include poems in love letters and encourages her to practice writing them. Marlowe offers to read a love letter if Britney would like to try writing one on a blank sheet of paper. Our girl freezes in surprise, remembering the harsh criticism her tutor gave her writing. She wonders if she really has to show it to His Highness. Pen in hand, Britney reminds herself that writing comes from the heart, and that's what truly matters. She begins writing, figuring this is a rare chance to have His Highness evaluate her work. Marlowe watches with quiet surprise, thinking the result is about what he expected. After reading the page, Marlowe's eyes light up as he declares it amazing. He enthusiastically praises her original word choices and unique structure, even saying he wants to show the poem to Luther and Ricardo. Britney can barely contain her delight at receiving such high praise. Marlowe invites Britney to simply call him Marlowe and declares her his comrade. Blushing, she says she's deeply honored. Britney realizes just how eccentric Marlowe really is. The dignified older brother from the manga was only one side of him, just as she remembers the gentle smile he once showed Meryl. Britney compliments the tea and says she's impressed that Marlowe personally researches medicinal herbs. He proudly explains that even the castle doctors are amazed by the variety of his collection and reveals he's prepared several antidotes just in case. Britney admits it's unsettling that he constantly needs antidotes. Marlowe calmly explains that many people in the palace want him dead. He adds that his medicines have made him highly resistant to poison. Our girl remembers that, in the original story, poison wasn't what killed him, an assassin's blade was. She asks whether he should take additional precautions to protect himself. She urges Marlowe to be far more cautious around anyone suspicious. He quietly meets her gaze. Marlowe smiles warmly and thanks Britney for her concern. He promises to pay closer attention to his security from now on. Britney hopes her advice will help keep Marlowe a little safer. A knock echoes through the room, and Marlowe invites the visitors inside. Luther enters with Ricardo close behind. Marlowe announces that he'd been looking for them. He proudly holds up the poem Britney wrote for him with a bright smile. In the background, our girl is completely mortified. Britney imagines herself as a pig lounging on a bed surrounded by snacks. She knows eating sweets leads to weight gain, but after pushing herself through another jog, she wonders why her heart still won't stop pounding. Marlowe calls out to Britney. Behind him, everyone stands in complete silence. Ricardo spits out his drink after reading the poem and declares it a masterpiece. Meanwhile, our girl despairs over adding yet another embarrassing chapter to her life and regrets ever trusting Marlowe's artistic judgment. Later, Marlowe sadly holds her hands and admits he's disappointed she's leaving. She promises to come visit him again. Lily and another young noblewoman eagerly ask to ride in Lord Luther's carriage. Britney sighs at how popular her older brother is with women. Luther chuckles and asks if she wanted to ride with him as well. Luther politely declines, saying he'd love to invite them along, but his carriage is already full. Nora offers an awkward smile, while Luther secretly thinks Britney is simply too big for everyone to fit. Britney grits her teeth and silently curses Luther for being such a sly. She turns to Ricardo and asks if she can ride in his carriage instead. He calmly agrees. Once they're inside the carriage, Ricardo bursts into laughter. An exasperated Britney tells him to stop laughing at her, but he can barely catch his breath as he insists her reaction is just too funny. Our girl breathes a sigh of relief, happy to have made it home safely after everything that happened. Ricardo smiles and says he learned a lot from the trip and plans to attend the Royal Academy next year, just like Luther. Ricardo points out that what Britney calls loneliness is really having no one left to ask for favors, adding that it does sound lonely. She immediately denies it, but Ricardo simply looks at her in silence. As they travel, Ricardo casually explains the region's irrigation, dry soil, architecture, local crops, and city planning. Britney is surprised by just how knowledgeable he is. She praises Ricardo for his knowledge. Despite the awful first impression he made, our girl is glad they managed to become friends. Spring arrives, and cherry blossoms bloom across the estate. After turning 13, Britney groans at her reflection in the mirror. She shuffles along in frustration, complaining that her weight is still stuck at 60 kilograms even after taking up horseback riding. Britney looks up in surprise and asks Luther what's wrong. He answers with an unusually somber expression. Britney studies the open ledger and quickly notices something odd. A particular expense immediately catches her attention. Luther reveals that his parents came begging for money while he was away in the capital, and grandfather eventually gave in. Britney breaks into a cold sweat at the news. A maid knocks on the door and informs Luther that his parents have arrived. Standing beside him, Britney freezes in shock. Luther places a hand on a severance document. Today, he'll make his position perfectly clear. He leans over the table and bluntly announces that he is cutting all ties with his parents. His mother erupts in anger, demanding to know what nonsense he's talking about, while his father declares the decision completely unacceptable. Luther condemns them for driving the family into debt through reckless spending. He scolds them for begging for money again just as they were escaping years of debt, and says he's ashamed to call them his parents. Britney quietly watches from the doorway. Luther's mother desperately begs grandfather to name her husband the next count, insisting Luther is still too young to understand the world. Grandfather hesitates, wiping his face. Suddenly, he warmly beckons Britney over for some snacks. Luther's parents demand that Britney be thrown out of the house and married off to any household, arguing that getting rid of such a financial burden would reduce the family's expenses. He steps in front of Britney and firmly defends her. He declares that marrying her off to just anyone is unreasonable because she's nothing like his parents. Luther points out that much of the Count family's recent prosperity is thanks to Britney. She's even earned the Crown Prince's favor, so casting her out without reason would be absurd. His mother immediately cuts him off, insisting she's speaking to grandfather, not him. Grandfather firmly refuses. No matter what anyone says, he won't let his precious Britney leave. He also reveals that he has given Luther full authority to sever ties with his parents. Panicking, Luther's mother grabs his arm and begs him to stop. She insists this has to be a lie, because they're family, and reminds him that he's only 18. Britney folds her arms and scoffs inwardly. Luther's parents never treated him like family until they needed something from him. Our girl realizes how miserable Luther's childhood must have been, trapped between toxic parents, an unreliable grandfather, and a foolish white pig of a cousin. Britney realizes he's been carrying everything on his own. All this time, he's quietly shouldered the family's burdens without complaint. Britney can't help thinking that almost no one recognizes how hard he's worked. His parents demand to know how he became so heartless. Suddenly, she steps in and tells them they're the truly heartless ones. The mother snaps that children should stay quiet. Britney immediately cuts in and tells her aunt that she's the one who should keep quiet. Britney reminds her aunt that Luther is the one constantly bowing his head to resolve the family's financial crises. The only reason anyone keeps lending them money is because they trust him. She weakly argues that he's still young. Britney fires back that it's shameful for a parent to keep burdening her own son without feeling the slightest guilt. Grandfather closes his eyes, declaring that he's had enough. He orders Luther's parents to never set foot on the Harks estate again. Grandfather also told them to stop contacting their grandchildren. From that day on, Luther's parents were officially banned from entering the Harks household. Britney nervously glances at Luther as they sit side by side on the sofa. The silence between them grows increasingly awkward. He thanks Britney, saying they resolved everything because of her support. She replies that she simply lost her temper. After a brief pause, Luther says something has been bothering him. He asks who she really is. The question leaves her frozen in shock. Britney asks if he's feeling all right and reminds him that she's his cousin Britney, while privately wondering if he's lost his mind. Luther says he's perfectly sane, but after living with her and watching her closely, he can't shake the feeling that something is different. He points out that Britney's knowledge and behavior are far beyond those of an ordinary 13-year-old. He adds that it's almost as if someone else has taken over her body, noting that none of the family's books mention hot springs or soap. Our girl breaks into a nervous sweat. Luther leans closer. Reminding her that they're family, he asks her to tell him the truth if she's hiding anything. Britney blushes as she looks up at Luther, wishing he wouldn't act so strangely charming toward his younger cousin. She frantically wonders what she could possibly say to convince him, or whether she should simply tell him the truth, no matter how unbelievable it sounds. Luther waits for an answer. Britney finally asks him whether he believes in past lives. He falls silent in confusion. Britney then cheerfully explains that she remembers a previous life and reveals those memories returned on the very day her engagement was called off. She tells him her old world was far more advanced, where she'd made soap before, and that she's been recreating products from those memories despite the different ingredients. Our girl explains that she was older than Luther in her previous life, which might explain why she seems so different. Britney turns to make a quick escape, but Luther catches her wrist before she can get away. He smiles warmly, telling her she's not escaping that easily. Whether her story is true or not, he's fascinated by the person she is now. Our girl lets out a startled squeak. Luther says her cold attitude wounds him, then admits he thinks so highly of her that even Princess Angela isn't worthy of being her conversation partner. The unexpected praise leaves Britney absolutely glowing. Britney vows to slim down before getting married. Her only problem is that she still can't get below 60 kilograms. Luther asks why she doesn't stop eating late at night. Confused, Britney asks what he means, and he wonders if she's forgotten all those midnight trips to the kitchen. A chill runs down Britney's spine as she suddenly remembers waking up in the kitchen with food already in her mouth. Britney grabs her face in horror as she realizes she's been sleep-eating all this time. Luther deadpans that she hadn't even noticed until now. Our girl hurriedly excuses herself and bolts from the room, shouting that she needs to deal with this immediately. Britney races down the estate hallway. She can hear Luther chuckling behind her and refuses to look back. Luther looks down at our girl and asks if she is all right. Britney lies sprawled beside her bed, groaning in pain. Our girl's hands are tightly bound with rope, yet she greets her brother with a cheerful good morning. Luther stands nearby, having tied the ropes himself. She assures him the ropes are only to stop her sleepwalking and nothing more. He tells her to get changed because they are going to greet Astarl. Our girl gasps as Luther explains that their parents left the family buried in debt, though someone has agreed to shoulder it for the time being. Britney carefully applies a face mask while trying not to spill the mixture. She reflects that the debt they nearly paid off has grown once again. Beside her, Luther inspects a twist-up lip balm as they speed up development of a beeswax lip balm and body powder made from cornstarch and talc from Nora's territory. The lemons originally grown for cosmetics are turned into commercial lemon yogurt, which quickly becomes a hit thanks to its refreshing taste. They are not the type to walk away from a setback empty-handed. A horse-drawn carriage rolls along the road as Britney wonders whether she really needs to come along. Luther replies that getting out and seeing the world once in a while is good for her. Luther suggests that our girl meet Astarl's eldest son, Mirold. He explains that Mirold is single, around his age, and a little sensitive. She shoots Luther a deadpan look and asks if he is seriously telling her to pursue the older brother instead of the younger. She internally concludes that he truly has no shame. Luther points a finger upward, explaining that Mirold is frail, so our girl could end up holding the real power. Our girl points out that even if that happens, there is no guarantee she would side with Luther. He lets out a quiet chuckle, amused that she has finally learned to speak her mind. Count Astarl warmly welcomes their visit. Meanwhile, Britney figures that since Mirold is Ricardo's older brother, he probably shares the same taste in women, meaning someone like her would be rejected long before an engagement. Luther politely apologizes for the trouble they have caused. Astarl smiles it off, saying people should help one another in difficult times, and adds that Lady Britney's priority soap supply has been a tremendous help. Astarl introduces his eldest son, Mirold Astarl, explaining that this is their first meeting and that he is helping manage the territory. Mirold greets them with a calm expression. Britney politely introduces herself to Mirold and offers him a warm greeting. Our girl is aware of how awkward the situation is. As Ricardo's older brother, Mirold surely knows she is the woman whose engagement was called off. Luther leaves to speak with the Count, telling Britney to do her best on her own. She glares after him, silently insisting she does not need his encouragement. Britney quietly fumes over Luther's shameless behavior until Mirold calls out to her. He says there is something he would like to discuss and asks if they can speak somewhere else. In the garden, Britney asks him what he wanted to discuss. Looking at her, he reveals that the topic is his younger brother. Mirold picks a piece of fruit from the tree and remarks that Britney and his brother seem unusually close. He then asks why she still spends time with the man who broke off their engagement. Our girl realizes that if Ricardo has not explained anything, their relationship must look incredibly strange. She wonders how she is supposed to explain such a complicated situation. Britney gently explains that although their engagement fell through, they both want to help develop their respective territories. She smiles, explaining that they have become reliable business partners. Mirold considers her answer for a moment before asking if their relationship is strictly business. Britney pauses in quiet surprise. He asks if she would be willing to conduct future business with him instead. He wants this since Ricardo is away at the Royal Academy. Our girl breaks into a nervous sweat. Mirold suggests that doing business with him would be far more convenient. Britney is left wondering if he is actually trying to flirt with her. Britney hurriedly runs off, shouting that she will discuss it with her cousin first. Later, Luther quietly notes that she avoided answering by making a quick escape. Our guy comments that she seems to be quite popular. Britney shoots him an irritated look. Seated behind paperwork, Luther explains that Count Astarl has yet to decide which son will inherit the family. Since Ricardo is exceptionally capable, he suspects the frail Mirold must be feeling the pressure. He thinks about how complicated the situation has become before something unusual in the papers catches her eye. After examining the ledger, our girl points out that the distribution department's bookkeeping does not add up. Luther reviews the records and agrees that the profits are unusually low for the reported production volume. Both realize something is clearly wrong. He suddenly asks whether Britney can ride a horse now. She replies that she can manage as long as it is normal riding, and he immediately suggests leaving because he wants to move quickly. She thinks if they are really going to investigate in this heat. Luther confirms it and tells her to get ready within 3 minutes. Later, Luther questions the distribution manager about the mismatched lotion inventory and sales records, asking if he knows anything about it. The manager nervously wipes the sweat from his face and claims the missing products were probably thrown away after expiring. He adds that whoever handled the disposal must have forgotten to record it in the ledger. Luther asks how much inventory was discarded. The manager stammers that all products are thrown away after a month and says he will have to check the records. Britney quietly notes that throwing products away after just 1 month seems far too soon. She recalls that her lotion normally lasts 3 to 6 months, making her question whether the products were really discarded. She realizes that if they reveal their suspicions now, any evidence could disappear. Our girl suddenly realizes this is the perfect moment to make use of her innocent image. Britney puts on a cheerful act, announcing that it is her first visit to the distribution department and that she wants to look around. She even jokes that she would not understand anything she saw anyway. The manager offers to assign someone to guide her, but she declines and heads off on her own, saying she will only take a quick look and might get bored anyway. Luther stops the manager by asking another question. As the flustered man turns back to answer, Britney slips away, silently praising her brother's perfect timing. Peeking through an open doorway, Britney spots 2 employees discussing a document. She politely apologizes for interrupting and asks them a question. Our girl happily returns and tells Luther that she learned how the products are distributed to the market. The manager quietly breathes a sigh of relief. Britney casually mentions that their uncles visited about a month ago to discuss something, then asks Luther if he is curious about what they talked about. The manager freezes in horror. A dark smile spreads across Luther's face. He calmly says he would like to know about that meeting as well and asks the man to explain. The manager tries to keep the truth hidden, but breaks down and confesses a few minutes later. He admits that the promise of a share of the profits tempted him into secretly diverting the products. He reveals that he falsified the ledgers, marked the lotion as discarded, handed it over to the uncles, and collected his reward. The stolen lotion was then sold by the uncles through black market channels. Standing beside a horse in the stables, Britney quietly fumes, thinking that her uncles never do anything honest. Britney looks up and calls Luther her big brother. He gently pats her on the head and tells her not to worry about it. His expression turns firm as he declares that sharing blood with someone does not put them above the law. He vows to arrest the uncles and have them imprisoned. Luther thanks her for everything she did today, praising her convincing performance and joking that she has quite the talent for acting. Soon afterward, the uncles are arrested for embezzlement and placed under house arrest. Luther thanks Britney once more and explains that they will soon be transferred to a detention facility at the foot of the mountain. A few days later, Britney slumps over her horse in exhaustion after another riding lesson. Her instructor praises her progress, saying her speed has improved enough that sprint riding should no longer be a problem. Suddenly, something clicks in her mind. Her instructor follows behind, calling out to ask what is going on. Britney urges her horse into a faster pace and announces that they should arrive any minute now. Our girl gallops ahead while happily calling Ricardo's name. He stands beside his horse and turns toward her voice. Ricardo greets Britney with a gentle smile, remarking that it has been a while. Britney eagerly waves at Ricardo, welcoming him home for summer break and thanking him for coming. She is amazed by how much taller and more mature he has become. Ricardo thanks her for everything she did with the soap business, adding that he is grateful she did not hand the rights over to his brother. She smiles and thanks Ricardo instead for sharing information about the academy classes, saying she learned a great deal from it. Ricardo notices that Britney has lost more weight and asks whether she has mastered horseback riding yet. She admits she has made a little progress with both, earning an amused smirk from Ricardo as he remarks that she has been working hard. Our girl proudly puffs herself up in response. Suddenly, the sound of heavy hoofbeats echoes nearby, making Ricardo stop and wonder what is coming. They spin around as a servant races toward them on horseback, shouting for them to flee to the estate because a mysterious armed group is approaching. The two race away on horseback as Britney anxiously wonders who their pursuers are. Ricardo glances back and urges her to ride faster, but she shouts that she is already going as fast as she can. As her horse charges ahead, our girl steels herself, realizing all those galloping lessons are finally paying off. She tells Ricardo to leave her behind and ride ahead to warn grandfather and her older brother, Luther. He immediately rejects the idea, angrily asking if she really thinks he would abandon a woman and run. He draws his sword as Britney watches. Ricardo tells her to leave at once, promising he will catch up after dealing with the attackers. Horrified, she desperately protests. An attacker suddenly strikes Ricardo from behind. Britney cries out his name in horror as masked assailants quickly overwhelm him. His sword slips from his grasp and clatters to the ground. At the same time, a masked attacker grabs Britney from behind, leaving her wondering what their true objective is. With her hands tied, our girl listens as one of the kidnappers laughs and says they got lucky by capturing Astarl's son as well. Britney freezes at the mention of ransom. The kidnapper boasts that demanding money from the Astarl family will make their payout even bigger and says both Count families should have received the ransom demand by now. Later, she turns to Ricardo and apologizes for dragging him into a kidnapping meant for her. He reassures her that none of this is her fault. Hearing laughter below, Ricardo guesses the kidnappers are underneath them and calls them careless fools. He tells Britney to keep watch while he looks for something to cut their ropes, and she nods in agreement. 3 kidnappers sit around a table playing cards as they chat. They laugh that the doting old count will surely pay the ransom, mocking him for not realizing he is being manipulated by his own daughter. After overhearing the conversation, our girl realizes in shock that the mastermind behind the kidnapping is her own aunt, who is heartless enough to exploit her father for money. Britney panics, realizing that if grandfather loses his composure, he will probably pay far more ransom than the kidnappers demanded. Meanwhile, Ricardo quietly calls her over. Our girl looks at him in surprise and asks how he got his ropes off. He points to a rough wooden pillar, explaining that he wore through them by rubbing the rope against it. He suddenly freezes and warns her that someone is coming as footsteps echo outside. She quickly tells Ricardo to hide behind her. Startled, he crouches out of sight just as she says. A man enters with a lit lantern and a cigarette hanging from his mouth. He greets the 2 captives, notices they are awake, and tells them to stay quiet. He explains that the others have gone to collect the ransom and assures them they will be released once everything is over. Putting on a frightened act, Britney tearfully says all the strange men are scaring her. She then innocently asks if he is the only one left in the building. The man scratches his head and admits that he is alone for now, adding that the others should return at any moment. The guy suddenly notices Ricardo and asks what happened to his ropes. Realizing they have been found out, she tells Ricardo to be ready to run because this is their only chance. Our girl slams both fists into the man's stomach, proudly declaring that she is used to being tied up every night. The man doubles over in pain and tumbles down the stairs, leaving Ricardo staring at her in complete disbelief. Ricardo stares in silence before scrambling to his feet and calling out to Britney as she disappears down the stairway. He breaks into a cold sweat, staring ahead in disbelief as he realizes this is actually happening. He freezes in shock as he wonders why Britney suddenly jumped down like that. He races down the stairs, frantically calling Britney's name. A soft groan echoes from below. Ricardo peers into the dark stairwell and desperately asks if she's still alive. Our girl lets out an awkward laugh while sitting atop the fallen guard, realizing this might be the first time she's ever been grateful for her weight. After an exhausted sigh, Ricardo cuts her ropes and angrily scolds her for doing something so reckless, warning that she could have been seriously hurt. She quietly apologizes. He reminds her that she was trying to help him escape, firmly declaring that he would never leave her behind. A gentle smile spreads across Britney's face as she realizes Ricardo has finally grown into an honest man. He clears his throat and suggests leaving the building for now, warning that the man's comrades could be nearby. They peek through a window from behind a large tree. Britney spots Luther inside and eagerly urges Ricardo to go to him, but he quickly grabs her wrist to stop her. He warns that the enemy will catch them first if they go now and insists they find a place to hide. Hidden in the bushes, Britney gasps as she recognizes the men searching with lanterns as the ones who attacked them. Ricardo points to a nearby wooden stable and suggests hiding inside. She quickly agrees. Our girl blushes nervously as she realizes they'll have to squeeze into a tiny cleaning supply closet. She silently panics after ending up pressed tightly against Ricardo in the cramped, dark closet. Ricardo tells her they need to get even closer or the door won't close. She lets out a startled squeak as Ricardo pulls her closer and mutters that she's hopeless. In the pitch-black closet, she realizes all she can sense is his heartbeat and steady breathing. Britney sheepishly apologizes, saying she must smell sweaty, but he quietly tells her otherwise. She reminds him that he once said he hated dirty women. Ricardo apologizes and asks if his harsh words still bother her, but Britney quietly admits he was right. He confesses that he was foolish and failed to see her true character, admitting he completely misunderstood her. Britney looks up in surprise as he calls her a genuinely good person, pointing out that she still treated him kindly and even risked herself to help him escape despite everything he said. Shouts erupt outside as the attackers realize they have searched everywhere except the stable. The stable door slowly creaks open, and both of them fall completely silent as someone steps inside. Footsteps draw closer to the closet. As an attacker wonders if they're hiding inside, Britney grabs his chest and silently prays they won't be found. The attacker dismisses the idea, reasoning that a noble child would never hide in such a filthy place. After a long moment, Ricardo cautiously peeks outside and confirms they're safe. Britney lets out a tearful sigh of relief and urges him to find Luther. Outside, Harks breathes a sigh of relief after confirming both children are safe, while asking if either of them is hurt. She says their injuries are only minor before asking about Luther. Harks explains that Luther is negotiating with the kidnappers as an attendant fusses over Ricardo, then assures them the area is surrounded and tells them to rest while he sends a messenger. Britney admires how thoroughly Luther planned the rescue. She asks if grandfather is at the mansion, only to learn that someone else is leading the operation. He reveals that Count Harks is the one in command, leaving our girl stunned. Clad in full armor, grandfather asks if that was the last enemy before ordering his troops to take every captive away immediately. Ricardo falls into thought as he remembers something his father once told him. His father had spoken of how Count Harks stopped an invasion from the north, saving their homeland from war and earning his lifelong respect. Britney finally understands why Count Astarl always treated grandfather with such respect. Grandfather and Luther ride toward them on horseback, prompting Britney to excitedly wave and call out. He rushes over and checks whether Britney and Ricardo are hurt. Ricardo can only stammer that they're fine. Grandfather blames the kidnapping on his own failings and declares that he intends to retire and take responsibility. He explains that he became lord at a young age and endured countless hardships, so he never wanted his grandson to bear the same burden. However, this incident has changed his mind. Grandfather smiles and says he can entrust everything to Luther without a single worry. Luther watches, in stunned silence, as he announces to the gathered soldiers that they are to serve Luther from now on while he steps back to support him. Britney smiles to herself, silently congratulating her older brother. Grandfather then tells her to head home with Ricardo while he and Luther finish their work. Ricardo asks if she's really all right, and she confidently nods, assuring him she isn't hurt. She jokes that maybe her extra weight cushioned the fall, earning an awkward nod from Ricardo. Ricardo remembers how powerless he felt, realizing they escaped the shed only because Britney took down the guard herself. He lowers his head, convinced none of this would have happened if he had been stronger. Meanwhile, Britney realizes the arrogant boy she first met has become someone she sees very differently. She smiles warmly and thanks Ricardo for being there. She says that after everything they went through together, she truly trusts him. A faint blush spreads across Ricardo's face as he realizes they've grown much closer. Britney suggests they lie down and get some rest, then jokingly apologizes in advance if she snores too loudly, leaving Ricardo wondering if she actually snores. The carriage rolls down the road as Ricardo stares ahead. Britney sleeps soundly with her head resting on his shoulder, leaving Ricardo flustered as he wonders if she even realizes she's leaning against a boy. At this rate, he knows he won't get any sleep. He lets out a quiet sigh, realizing Britney was never the awful girl he believed she was. He admits to himself that she's actually hardworking and kind-hearted. For a brief moment, Ricardo wonders how things might have turned out if they had never called off their engagement. The thought catches him off guard, and he immediately scolds himself for even considering it. Ricardo grows increasingly flustered, wondering if those thoughts mean he's starting to have feelings for her. His expression darkens as he remembers that he was the one who ended their engagement. After everything he put her through, he cannot imagine the house of Count Harks ever accepting him again. When the carriage finally arrives, Ricardo reaches over to wake her but is startled to discover she's burning with a fever. A butler cries out in surprise as Ricardo carries the sleeping Britney on his back, explaining that he wants to let her rest and asking where her room is. Luther steps out to greet Ricardo and welcomes him back. He sincerely apologizes for dragging him into his family's troubles and thanks him for protecting Britney. He lowers his head and admits he barely did anything. Despite all his confidence in his swordsmanship, he feels completely powerless. Ricardo declares that he wants to become as strong as him so he can truly protect Britney next time. Luther smiles gently and pats Ricardo on the head. He looks up at him and quietly realizes he'll never be able to match Luther's calm presence. Britney slowly opens her eyes and sits up in bed, noticing someone beside her. She calls out, wondering if it's her brother, Luther. Luther smiles warmly and asks if she's finally awake. Our girl stares at him in surprise, wondering why he's here. She glances around the room before quietly wondering who carried her back to bed. He says Ricardo was probably the one who carried her and admits he was genuinely worried. He suggests visiting Ricardo once she's feeling better, while Britney deadpans over whether carrying her gave him a sore arm. Britney silently wonders if Luther was taking care of her this whole time, as he pulls over a serving cart and asks if she wants something to eat, to which Britney quietly agrees. Luther holds out a spoonful of food and tells Britney to open her mouth, leaving her shouting in shock. She quickly refuses, insisting she can feed herself. Luther simply smiles and tells her to stop being picky and say, "Ah," making her wonder if he's just enjoying her embarrassment. He casually asks if it's true that she took down one of the kidnappers. She laughs awkwardly and insists it was pure luck, explaining that she only tried to shove him away before they both fell. A chuckle escapes Luther as he reveals the kidnapper claims she crushed him with her full body weight. An annoyed Britney clenches her fist and demands to know where he is now. He admits he's simply grateful that both of them made it back safely. Britney looks at him and realizes he wasn't teasing her after all. Ricardo appears in the doorway and asks if her fever has gone down. Britney smiles and assures him she's feeling much better. She thanks him for carrying her to her room and worries that she must have been heavy, but Ricardo quickly insists she wasn't heavy at all and tells her to stop worrying about things like that. He looks at her with a smile and says she still needs more rest. He asks to have a proper talk once she's fully recovered. Britney smiles back and warmly thanks him. Rain falls across the estate as sunflowers sway in the garden. Britney reflects that although it's still summer, cloudy and rainy days are much kinder to chubby people. She pauses over her meal, quietly wondering if something is different about Ricardo. Count Astarl tearfully points toward the training grounds, saying his son has been swinging his sword non-stop like he's possessed, while Ricardo relentlessly continues his training in the background. Grandfather quietly nods in understanding. Beside him, Britney lets out an awkward sigh. She realizes Ricardo is probably still bothered by being unable to fight back during the kidnapping. Deciding she also needs to protect herself, she turns to Grandfather with a request. Grandfather warmly tells her he'll grant any wish she has. She immediately asks to learn swordsmanship and martial arts for self-defense, leaving him completely stunned. He panics, insisting she's a delicate young lady and anxiously asking what would happen if she got hurt. Our girl clasps her hands with teary, pleading eyes and sweet talks Grandfather until he finally caves and tells her to leave everything to him. Britney reflects on how easily Grandfather agreed to teach her self-defense. Outside the estate, the instructors line up the soldiers and order them to train Lady Britney. He raises a fist and proudly declares the start of his boot camp. The soldiers answer with a thunderous cheer, leaving Britney completely bewildered. Britney stares at Luther in disbelief and asks if he's actually used to this. He casually jogs past with a calm smile, saying it's excellent exercise. The instructor clenches his fist and bellows for everyone to get ready, drawing a deafening battle cry from the soldiers. Grandfather demonstrates by throwing soldiers to the ground and pinning them with overwhelming force. Our girl watches in horror, wondering if this is really self-defense or just a full-blown assault. The soldiers roar as they count out squat repetitions around her. Britney struggles to keep up, convincing herself this must be the foundation of self-defense since she's only a beginner. He flexes with Britney perched on his shoulders and shouts that they'll do 3 more sets. The soldiers eagerly cheer while she wonders what on earth is going on. Another battle cry shakes the training grounds, leaving Britney questioning what self-defense is supposed to be anymore. Wiping away her sweat, she turns to Luther and admits she's giving it everything she has, feeling like a completely different person than before. Britney proudly flexes her arms and tells Luther that everyone keeps saying she's gotten much stronger. Our girl cheerfully asks Luther whether he's better at martial arts or swordsmanship. Inspecting his rapier, Luther replies that he's learned the basics and muses that it might be time for a change of pace. A sly smile spreads across Britney's face as she asks Luther if he'll spar with her for a bit. She eagerly imagines this as the perfect chance to humble her smug cousin, picturing herself standing triumphantly over a defeated Luther. Luther calmly accepts the challenge. After loosening his tie, he invites Britney to come at him. Luther effortlessly knocks Britney's rapier into the air and slips behind her, warning that her guard is full of openings. Startled by the sudden move, she snaps that he's fighting unfairly and demands a proper duel. He points out that real enemies never fight fair and will gladly use dirty tricks to win. Luther motions for her to come again, warning that refusing to adapt will leave her defenseless against a real opponent. Dark clouds gather above the estate's towering clock tower. Britney realizes her cousin's training is far harsher than the soldiers' drills and silently vows to prove him wrong someday. Nearby, Ricardo continues practicing with unwavering focus. Watching his determination, she steels herself and refuses to let him see her at her weakest. Heavy snow blankets the Harks estate as a brutal winter settles over the north. Even bundled in a thick coat, Britney shivers and grumbles that the cold still bites despite all the muscle she's gained. A lone figure pushes through the deep snow outside the estate. Once the cold seeps into your bones, warming up becomes a battle of its own. With a bath bucket in hand, our girl heads for the hot spring, convinced there's no better cure for a freezing day. The bamboo door suddenly slides open, revealing Luther. She asks if he's heading to the hot spring too. He smiles and says the freezing weather finally convinced him to take a soak. Luther jokes that he's glad they didn't accidentally run into each other while changing. A flustered Britney fires back that it won't happen again because she already put a sign on the door. She pouts and complains that teasing a girl her age is in poor taste. He just smirks and reminds her that she's actually older than him on the inside. Luther still brings up her past life story from time to time, leaving her to wonder if he actually believes it. Luther changes the subject, reminding her that her 14th birthday is just around the corner. He asks if she still remembers the promise they made. Britney suddenly recalls their agreement to find a fiancé before turning 15. If she fails, she'll be sent off to the royal capital. The realization hits her like a bolt of lightning. She only has 1 year left. She desperately asks for 1 more year, arguing that the territory has been dealing with one crisis after another. Luther simply smiles, says a promise is a promise, and asks if she's already losing her nerve. A chibi Britney immediately explodes in protest. She clenches her fists and vows to prove him wrong by finding herself a wealthy fiancé. Our girl declares that she'll make her older brother eat those words before slamming the bamboo door shut right in his face. She immediately realizes what she just blurted out. Britney studies her reflection. Although she's lost plenty of weight, she still finds her face too plain. Her gaze drifts to her makeup collection, but she knows her beginner skills can only do so much, leaving her wondering what else she can try. She heads down the hallway and stops outside Luther's room. The double doors are slightly open, making her wonder if he forgot to close them. She quietly peeks inside the study. Her eyes settle on a document resting beside a stack of paperwork, and curiosity gets the better of her. She picks up the document and finds an official portrait of a beautiful young woman. It looks like a marriage proposal, and she's startled to notice the girl has the same hairstyle and eye color as her. A voice suddenly comes from behind. Britney jumps as Luther appears at the doorway and asks what she's doing in his room. She hurriedly apologizes for entering without permission, explaining that she was just passing by and got curious. Luther asks if the portrait caught her attention. Our girl immediately insists she isn't judging his preferences or accusing him of being interested in much younger girls. Luther can only stare in confusion and ask what she's talking about. Blushing, she holds up the portrait and asks if the girl is supposed to be his future fiancée. He glances at the portrait before letting out an amused chuckle. Britney tilts her head and asks if she got it wrong. He explains that the portrait was never meant for him. It's actually the official portrait of Britney that was prepared for her arranged meeting with Ricardo. Our girl stares at the painting in disbelief. The elegant beauty in the portrait is supposed to be her. He admits his original plan was to send only her portrait first, so the other side would have a harder time refusing before meeting her in person, though it ultimately failed. Britney accuses him of trying to trick everyone, and he casually admits she isn't wrong. Luther remarks that he has no use for the portrait anymore. She immediately asks if she can have it instead. He watches her walk away in mild confusion before deciding he doesn't mind letting her keep it. Britney carefully recreates the portrait's look. She enhances her eyes with makeup, contours her nose, and finishes with lipstick, determined to match the painting as closely as possible. She proudly reveals the finished result, explaining that she used the portrait as a reference. Grandfather and Luther are left staring in stunned silence. Luther admits she now looks almost identical to the portrait. He even jokes that her engagement might not have fallen through if she'd done this sooner. Britney forces a smile and declares she'll keep improving from now on. Grandfather simply smiles and says she's always been adorable, no matter what. Luther hands her a sealed letter, mentioning that Ricardo sent it and joking that the two seem surprisingly close. Britney accepts it with a smile, saying Ricardo always helps her when he can and is genuinely a good person. He asks if that's really all Ricardo means to her. Britney looks at him in confusion. She quietly reflects that although she's grown used to this world, she still can't quite figure out her older brother. Night falls over the estate as Ricardo's letter rests open on a desk. He writes that several months have passed since they last met and asks how she's been, adding that little has changed on his side. Britney smiles as she reads the letter. It sounds exactly like Ricardo, and she decides to keep her weight loss a secret so she can surprise him when they meet again. She remembers the despair she felt after realizing she'd reincarnated into the world of a shoujo manga. Now, she believes that as long as she keeps moving forward, she can still change her fate. Britney opens the window and looks up at the star-filled sky as a chilly breeze brushes past. She vows never to join Angela's entourage or end up facing the execution that awaits them. A bright smile spreads across her face. The new Britney starts here, and she'll never let anyone call her the white pig lady again. Our girl happily jogs along the estate path, enjoying how effortlessly her body moves now that she's reached 40 kilograms. She cheerfully wishes Luther a good morning as they pass in the hallway. Deep down, she reminds herself that staying in shape is the key to avoiding Angela's entourage. Luther stops her and hands over an envelope, saying an invitation has arrived in her name. Britney reads the letter in surprise and realizes it's from Crown Prince Marlowe. He invites her to the royal capital for an upcoming event. Luther suggests she accept the invitation since she's supposed to be searching for a fiancé. While she's there, he also asks her to keep an eye on the latest trends in the capital. She realizes just how busy her older brother has become since inheriting the title of Count. The Count of the North clearly doesn't have time to accompany her. Britney wonders why the title Count of the North sounds so familiar before deciding Luther must have been nothing more than a minor background character in the original manga. Luther mentions that Ricardo is probably in the royal capital too, and suggests reaching out to him. Britney agrees with the plan and calls out for Maria. Now, serving as Britney's personal attendant, Maria steps forward with a smile and asks if she needs anything. Maria mentions that Lady Nora is also expected to attend the event. Britney blinks in surprise and asks if that's really true. 2 years later, Britney finally returns to the royal capital. As she looks toward the towering castle, Maria marvels at the view. Britney remembers the rumors that Princess Angela has been keeping a low profile and tells herself everything should be fine. Prince Marlowe smiles as he examines a decorative bottle and remarks that it has a pleasant herbal scent. Britney recalls that this period was supposed to be peaceful in the original manga, meaning His Highness's tragic fate is still far in the future. She gazes out the carriage window, knowing this visit will be different. This time, Maria and several attendants will accompany her to the royal palace. The maids happily celebrate how spacious the carriage feels with everyone riding together. A wide gap now separates the seats, revealing just how much space has suddenly opened up inside the carriage. The carriage suddenly comes to a stop. Britney looks around in confusion, and Maria confirms they've stopped moving. Maria steps outside to see what happened, telling everyone she'll be back shortly. Britney peers outside and asks if a carriage is blocking the road ahead. Maria nods, explaining that another carriage has blocked the route while a line of carriages behind them makes turning around impossible. Britney grows anxious, worried she won't make it to her meeting with Ricardo. Without hesitation, she announces that she'll borrow a spare horse. Maria is left stunned by the sudden decision. Britney climbs onto the horse and tells Maria she'll ride ahead. They can meet up again once the traffic clears. She looks up at her with concern and asks how she'll find her way through the capital. Britney confidently explains that the royal capital is laid out in a grid, so she doubts she'll get lost. Maria watches in silence as Britney rides off, waving goodbye from atop her horse. The other maids can only marvel at how much their lady has changed. She rides through the royal capital's cobblestone streets until a luxurious carriage catches her eye. One look at the royal crest is enough to make her stop. Princess Angela immediately comes to mind. Britney groans inwardly, convinced only that troublesome princess could cause such a commotion, and can't believe she's already run into her. She quickly gets off her horse and notices the carriage's owner is still inside a nearby shop. Leading the horse by the reins, she quietly slips past, hoping to avoid being noticed. As Britney walks down the street, people keep staring at her. She nervously wonders why she's attracting so much attention. She starts wondering if women in the capital simply don't ride horses. Reassuring herself that she's no longer the girl she used to be, Britney scans the crowd for Ricardo and accidentally bumps into a blonde young man. She looks up in surprise and realizes it's Ricardo. He stares back in disbelief and asks why she didn't say anything when she'd been looking for him all along. Britney happily greets him, saying it's been a long time since they last met. He blinks several times, struggling to believe the person standing in front of him is really Britney. Still in shock, he finally asks if she's truly Britney. She grins and teases him, asking if he's already forgotten her face after only half a year. Ricardo blurts out that she looks like a completely different person, refusing to believe she only lost a little weight. Then it suddenly clicks, she now looks exactly like the portrait. Britney awkwardly apologizes and asks if he's talking about the fake portrait they used for her profile. Ricardo frantically waves his hands, insisting she has nothing to apologize for and that the mistake was entirely on their side. An attendant steps forward to take the horse's reins, allowing them to continue on together. She smiles and tells Ricardo he's grown even taller and more handsome since they last met. The compliment leaves him frozen. A sudden nosebleed sends Ricardo reeling. Britney immediately asks if he's all right, while he weakly insists he's perfectly fine. The moment he covers his face, Ricardo realizes that was a complete lie. He's in serious trouble. Britney gently reminds him to watch where he's walking. Ricardo can't take his eyes off her, amazed that she's become even more beautiful than he ever imagined. Blushing from ear to ear, Ricardo stares at the portrait in his hands. The woman who once existed only in that painting now stands right in front of him. He recalls seeing Britney arrive on horseback and realizes how much effort she must have put into changing herself. Even the people in the courtyard couldn't stop wondering who the beautiful young lady was. Ricardo notices the crowd staring at Britney and clicks his tongue in annoyance. Before anyone else can approach, he reaches over and firmly takes her hand. Still holding her hand, Ricardo tells her the venue is this way. She looks at him in surprise, but quietly follows. He leads her into the grand hall and points out the tables filled with food and desserts. Her eyes lock onto a beautifully made tart on a dessert stand. Britney wavers in temptation, convincing herself that one little bite couldn't hurt. Then reality hits. She panics, reminding herself that even one bite could ruin all her hard-earned progress. A young noble calls out that he's finally found Ricardo and jokes that he's been wandering around with a mysterious beauty. She immediately recognizes the freckled noble who once mocked her as a fatso and a white pig. As he approaches, Ricardo steps in front of her and shoots him a cold glare. Britney can't believe they were talking about her. Watching Ricardo drive the other young men away, she realizes how dramatically their attitudes have changed and starts losing faith in people. She ends up stress-eating her way through the dessert table while Ricardo watches with concern. Halfway through another sweet, Britney suddenly realizes what she's doing and freezes in horror.